The Wyoming Territory, 1874. A woman steps off a dusty stagecoach into smoke-filled air, clutching a letter that promised a new beginning. But instead of a welcoming cabin and waiting husband, she finds only smoldering ruins and empty promises. What happens next reveals the true strength of the human spirit and proves that sometimes our greatest challenges lead us to exactly where we're meant to be. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Jane Whitmore pressed her palm against the cracked window of the stagecoach as it rumbled over the rough mountain road. 26 years old, with auburn hair already showing silver from 2 years of nursing her dying mother through consumption, she clutched a bundle of 23 letters that had carried her hopes across a continent. Each envelope bore the same careful handwriting: Thomas Brennan, Stormwind Creek, Wyoming Territory. The stagecoach lurched to a halt, sending dust swirling through the windows like powdered gold in the afternoon sun. "Stormwind Creek," announced the driver, a gruff man named Pete who hadn't spoken more than 5 words to her during the 3-day journey from Cheyenne. Sarah straightened her traveling dress, a serviceable brown wool that had seen her through. Her mother's funeral 6 weeks ago. In her carpetbag lay 2 other dresses, her mother's silver locket, a worn copy of Practical Hints for Housewives, and exactly $47.32, the remainder of her inheritance. After paying for the journey west, Thomas Brennan had written that he would meet her at the stage stop. His letters had painted a picture of a modest but comfortable homestead, a man of 35 with a steady income from cattle ranching, and most importantly, a desire for companionship that matched her own desperate need for security. Sarah had answered his advertisement in the Philadelphia Inquirer not from romantic dreams, but from stark necessity. Her mother's medical bills had consumed their small savings. Without family or prospects in Pennsylvania, the West offered her only realistic chance for survival. The driver offered his hand as she descended, her boots sinking into the clay mud of what passed for Stormwind Creek's main street. The town consisted of a general store, a blacksmith, a saloon with peeling paint, and a small building marked Territorial Office that served as post office, courthouse, and occasional jail. "Where might I find Thomas Brennan?" Sarah asked the driver, scanning the handful of men lounging on the general store's porch. Pete spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Don't know any Brennan. Check at Murphy's store." He began unloading her trunk, a battered wooden chest that had belonged to her grandmother. Inside Murphy's general store, the air smelled of pickled vegetables and tobacco. A thin man with wire spectacles looked up from his ledger as she approached. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Thomas Brennan. I was told he ranches near here." The man's brow furrowed. "Brennan? Can't say I know that name, miss. How long has he been in these parts?" 6 months, according to our correspondence." Sarah's mouth went dry. "He arranged for me to... We're to be married." Murphy set down his pen. "Mail order arrangement?" "Yes." Heat crept up her neck. "Well, now that's a shame. We get fellows passing through, setting up correspondence, making promises." He shook his head. "Truth is, there's no Thomas Brennan owns land around Stormwind Creek. Never has been, far as I know." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. 6 months of letters, plans made. Her entire inheritance was spent on this journey. She gripped the edge of his counter to steady herself. "Is there perhaps a misunderstanding? Maybe he ranches further out." "Miss, I've been here 8 years. Know every rancher, every homesteader within 30 miles. No Brennan. Sorry to say it, but you've been swindled." Sarah's vision blurred, but she refused to cry in front of this stranger. "Thank you for your honesty." Outside, she stood in the dying light, her trunk at her feet, holding 23 letters from a man who didn't exist. The stagecoach was already disappearing down the road, trailing dust like a ghost. "You all right, ma'am?" A woman's voice came from behind her. Sarah turned to see a Mexican woman in a worn calico dress, concern etched on her weathered face. I was expecting to meet someone, but it appears—" Sarah's voice broke. She couldn't finish the sentence. "Rosa Martinez," the woman introduced herself. "My husband Juan owns the blacksmith shop. You came for a husband, see?" Sarah nodded, shame burning through her chest. "Happens more than you'd think. Men writing letters, real men, fake men, men who change their minds." Rosa touched Sarah's arm gently. "What will you do now?" "I don't know." The honesty felt like another failure. "I spent everything I had getting here. The hotel charges $2 a night," Rosa said. "Too much for most." "But," she hesitated, "there's a cabin about 2 miles east. Used to belong to the Dawson family before they moved to California. Been empty since spring. Not much, but it has walls and a roof." "Is it available?" "Nobody owns it now. Territory claims it, I suppose. Juan and I occasionally bring supplies to anyone who needs shelter. There. If you can make it habitable, you could stay for a while. At least until you figure out what's next." Hope stirred. "Fragile, but real. Could you draw me a map?" "Better than that. Juan can drive you there tomorrow morning. But Miss, Rosa's expression turned serious. "It's isolated. Nearest neighbor is 3 miles further. You'd be alone." "I've been alone before," Sarah said quietly. That night, she spent 2 of her precious dollars at the hotel, lying awake on a straw mattress, listening to raucous laughter from the saloon below. She read through Thomas Brennan's letters, one final time, looking for clues she'd missed. His handwriting was educated, his sentiments respectful. He'd mentioned spring roundups, winter preparations, and a favorite horse named Thunder. Every detail now felt like deliberate deception. By dawn, she'd made her decision. She would go to the Dawson cabin. She would survive. She would not return east a failure. Juan Martinez proved to be a man of few words and considerable kindness. His wagon rattled over barely visible tracks through tall grass and scattered pine groves. Sarah sat beside him, her trunk secured in the wagon bed, watching the landscape grow wilder with each mile. "Good hunting here," Juan finally said, pointing to a creek running parallel to their path. "Deer, sometimes elk. Rosa will show you which. Implants you can eat, important to know before winter." The cabin appeared like a mirage through the trees. It was smaller than she'd imagined, built of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney and a sagging porch, but it was whole, and it was shelter. As Juan helped her down, the acrid smell of old smoke became noticeable. He frowned, walking toward the cabin. "That's not right." Sarah followed, her stomach tightening. The door hung askew on its hinges. Juan pushed it open, and the morning light revealed devastation. Everything inside was charred. The potbelly stove lay overturned. Blackened remains of furniture dotted the floor. The wooden walls were scarred with smoke damage, and a large portion of the roof had burned away, leaving sky visible through broken beams. "Fire must have happened recently," Juan said grimly. "Maybe 2 weeks ago. Lightning, maybe, or—" He didn't complete the thought. Sarah stood in the doorway, feeling as though she might shatter. First Thomas Brennan, now this. Was the universe conspiring against her? "The barn seems intact," Juan pointed out, gesturing to a smaller structure behind. "The cabin. And the well house. The walls here can be repaired, but it will take work." "I can work," Sarah said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. She'd already lost everything. This burned cabin was still more than she'd had that morning. Juan studied her for a long moment. "Rosa will come check on you in a few days. Bring food, maybe some tools. After he left, Sarah stood alone among the ruins. Sunlight streamed through the damaged roof, illuminating motes of ash still floating in the air. The cabin felt like a physical manifestation of her shattered plans, but as she explored further, she discovered reasons for hope. The root cellar, accessed through a door in the floor, remained untouched. Inside, she found dusty mason jars of preserved vegetables, some hardtack, and several candles. The barn, while weathered, kept out rain and contained remnants of hay, a few rusty tools, and crucially, a pile of spare wooden planks. She spent her first night in the barn loft, wrapped in the 2 blankets she'd packed, listening to mice scurrying. Below, sleep came fitfully, interrupted by strange sounds of the Wyoming wilderness, howls that might have been coyotes, the crack of falling branches, and once something large moving through the brush nearby. Dawn came with breathtaking beauty. From the barn's window, she could see rolling hills painted gold and green, with the distant mountains purple against the sky. A herd of antelope grazed in the meadow beyond the creek. For a moment, the beauty made her forget her desperate circumstances. The next days blurred into a rhythm of survival. She cleared debris from the cabin, salvaging what she could: a cast-iron skillet with only minor warping, 3 intact chairs, a battered coffee pot. She learned to start fires using the tinderbox she'd brought, though her attempts at cooking over an open flame resulted in more burnt meals than edible ones. Her hands, soft from years of respectable indoor work, began to blister and callous. Her traveling dress tore on protruding nails, forcing her to change into her spare clothing. She rationed the preserved food carefully, supplementing it with edible plants Rosa had hastily pointed out: dandelions, wild onions, rose hips. On the 5th day, as she struggled to patch a hole in the cabin wall using barnwood, she heard hoofbeats. A rider approached through the morning mist, tall, broad-shouldered, on a paint horse that moved with unusual quiet. He reined in 20 feet from the cabin, studying her work. His hat brim shadowed his face, but she could see dark hair, a strong jawline, skin weathered by sun and wind. He said nothing. "Good morning," Sarah called out, uncomfortable with the silence. She wiped her hands on her skirt. "I'm Sarah Whitmore. I'm staying here temporarily." The rider nodded slightly, but remained silent. "The cabin was burned when I arrived. I'm trying to make it habitable again." Why was she explaining herself? This man had no claim on her actions. He swung down from his horse with fluid grace, ground-tying the animal with just a spoken word. Walking closer, he examined her repair work, then pointed to the wall she'd been struggling with. "Wrong angle," he said, his voice deep and rough with disuse. "Needs support here." He traced a line with his finger. Those were his only words, but his meaning was clear. He retrieved a saw from his saddlebags and, without asking permission, began cutting a support beam. His movements were precise, economical. Sarah watched, uncertain whether to be grateful or offended by this unsolicited help. The man worked silently, measuring twice, cutting once. Within an hour, he'd installed proper support for her makeshift wall. When finished, he gathered his tools. "Marcus Cole," he said simply, touching his hat brim. "Thank you, Mr. Cole. I'm afraid I can't pay you for—" He shook his head, cutting off her offer. "Neighbor," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the east. "Check back." Before she could respond, he mounted his horse and rode away, disappearing. As quietly as he'd arrived, Sarah stared after him, confused and oddly comforted. Her first visitor in this vast isolation hadn't been threatening or judgmental. He'd seen a problem and fixed it without expecting anything in return. The encounter gave her renewed energy. She worked through the afternoon, using Marcus's support structure to complete the wall repair. As sunset approached, she attempted to cook beans over her fire pit, managing to produce something almost edible. That night, lying in the barn again, the cabin still too smoky for sleeping, She thought about the strange day, a silent man appearing out of nowhere, helping without explanation, then vanishing. In Philadelphia, such behavior would have been suspicious. Here, it felt different, essential, perhaps. The days that followed fell into a pattern. She rose before dawn, worked on cabin repairs, scavenged for edible plants, tended a small vegetable plot she'd discovered behind the cabin, and coaxed life back into the damaged structure. Rosa arrived on the 7th day, bringing cornmeal, dried beans, and a bundle of cooking herbs. She surveyed Sarah's progress with approval. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You're stronger than you look," Rosa observed, noting the improved state of the cabin. "That wall, did you do it yourself?" "I had help," Sarah admitted. "A man named Marcus Cole stopped by." Rosa's eyebrows rose. "Marcus helped you? You know him? Know of him? Lives alone on the Circleless Ranch, about 3 miles east. Keeps to himself. Very quiet. Some folks say too quiet, but Juan thinks highly of him." Rosa handed Sarah a wrapped package. "Fresh bread, and I brought this." She pulled out a bundle of newspapers. "Thought you might want news from back east." Sarah accepted gratefully, though part of her wanted to leave that world behind forever. As Rosa prepared to leave, she paused. "There's talk in town. Some folks wondering about the single woman living out here alone. I told them you're doing fine, but be careful. Not everyone wishes strangers well." After Rosa left, Sarah read the newspapers by candlelight. Political upheaval back east, economic depression, social scandals that had seemed important weeks ago now felt irrelevant. Her world had narrowed to these few acres, to the daily challenge of survival, to the gradual transformation of a burned ruin into something resembling a home. 2 weeks after her arrival, she woke to find a pile of cut firewood stacked neatly beside the cabin. No note, no explanation. When Marcus Cole rode past that afternoon, she waved her thanks from the porch. He touched his hat, but didn't stop. More gifts appeared. A repaired water bucket by the well, fresh deer meat hanging from the porch beam wrapped in muslin. Each time, Marcus would ride by and acknowledge her silent thanks with a nod before continuing on his way. Sarah began to anticipate these visits, though visit was too generous a term. Marcus rarely dismounted, never entered the cabin, spoke. Perhaps 5 words per encounter, yet his presence became a reliable part of her routine. "My roof still leaks," she mentioned one day as he paused to water his horse at the well. "I'll look," he replied, the longest sentence he'd yet spoken to her. True to his word, he returned 3 days later with materials and spent an afternoon patching the roof. Sarah attempted to help, but his efficiency made her feel clumsy. She settled for preparing coffee, which he accepted with a nod. "Why do you help me?" she asked during one of these coffee breaks, desperate to understand his motivation. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, his grey eyes unreadable. "Neighbors help neighbors. But I'm not really... I mean, I don't belong here." "You're here," he said simply. "That's enough." Something in his matter-of-fact acceptance made her eyes sting. When was the last time someone had accepted her presence without question or judgment? As autumn approached, Sarah's days are filled with preparation. Rosa had taught her to preserve food, to recognize signs of weather change, to winterize her shelter. The cabin had become genuinely habitable, thanks to her own labor, and Marcus's intermittent assistance. She developed routines, morning chores, afternoon repairs, evening reading by the fire, now burning cleanly in the repaired stove. Her hands, once soft, now bore the calluses of honest work. Her body, often weak during her mother's illness, had grown strong from physical labor. One September afternoon, as she harvested the last of the wild berries, She heard voices approaching through the trees. 2 men on horseback, neither of them. "Marcus? Well, well," the first called out, reining in his horse. "Look what we've found, Ned. A city girl playing frontier wife." The speaker was perhaps 40, with an untrimmed beard and clothing that suggested he rarely visited town. His companion, younger and nervous-looking, shifted in his saddle. "Good afternoon," Sarah said warily, straightening from her berry-picking. "Afternoon, miss. I'm Caleb Owen. This here's Ned. We ranch about 4 miles south." He leaned forward, in his saddle. "Heard talk about a lady living alone out here. Thought we'd introduce ourselves." "That's kind of you," Sarah replied carefully. Something in Owen's manner set her on edge. Kindness doesn't cover it. Dangerous thing, a woman alone. All sorts of incidents can happen. His gaze moved slowly over her figure. "Maybe you need someone looking out for you more regular-like." Sarah's heartbeat quickened. "I'm managing well, thank you." "Managing and thriving are different things." Owen dismounted, tying his horse to a nearby tree. "Why don't you pour us some coffee? We'll talk about how things work in these parts." "I'm afraid I was just heading inside," Sarah said, backing toward the cabin. "Now that's unfriendly." Owen's voice hardened. When folks make the effort to visit, proper courtesy demands. A single gunshot echoed across the clearing. Owen's hat flew off his head. Marcus Cole sat his horse 30 yards away, a smoking rifle across his saddle. His face was stone, but his message was clear. "Morning, Caleb," he said, his voice carrying an undertone Sarah had never heard before. Owen's face reddened. "This isn't your business, Cole." "Lady's a neighbor," Marcus replied. "That makes it my business." The tension stretched like a bowstring. Ned was already edging his horse away. Owen retrieved his hat, his movements jerky with suppressed anger. "This ain't finished, Cole." "It is," Marcus said flatly. Owen mounted his horse with unnecessary violence. "Come on, Ned. Some folks don't appreciate good intentions." After they rode away, Sarah found herself shaking. Marcus holstered his rifle and dismounted. "You all right?" he asked. "Yes, thank you." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't think they meant... That is, perhaps I misunderstood." "You didn't misunderstand." Marcus's jaw was tight. "Owen's got a reputation. Thinks lone women need his protection whether they want it or not. Why did you happen by? You don't usually visit in the afternoon." For the first time, Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Saw them heading this direction. Thought I should check." The realization struck her. He'd been watching out for her from a distance. "You've been keeping guard?" "Paying attention," he corrected. "Different thing." Sarah sank onto the porch steps, delayed reaction setting in. "Where I come from, a woman's reputation can be ruined by far less than living alone in the wilderness. Here, it seems I need to worry about more than gossip." Marcus sat on the steps beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Different. Dangers, different rules. You've done well adapting." "Have I? Sometimes I feel like I'm barely holding on. Like one strong wind could blow away everything I've managed to build." "That's pioneer life for everyone. Men, women, families. The difference is having people to lean on when the wind blows." She looked at him directly. "Why do you help me, Marcus? Really? You owe me nothing." He was quiet for so long, she thought. He wouldn't answer. Finally he said, "Had a sister once. Sarah, like you, came west with her husband. He died their second winter. She tried to make it alone." His hands tightened on his knees. "Found her the next spring." "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "Me too. Never got there in time to help her." He stood abruptly. "Won't let that happen again. If I can help it." The raw honesty in his voice left her speechless. Marcus untied his horse, preparing to leave. "Marcus!" He turned back. "Thank you. For today, for everything." He nodded, touching his hat brim. "I'll ride more regular for a while, just till Owen gets the message." After he left, Sarah remained on the porch as darkness gathered. The encounter with Owen had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. But Marcus's protection, his quiet vigilance, provided an unexpected comfort. For the first time since arriving in Wyoming, she realized she wasn't truly alone. She had neighbors, even if one of them barely spoke, and the other had become an unwelcome presence. Night fell, bringing the symphony of crickets and distant coyote calls she'd learned to find comforting. Inside the cabin, she lit her evening fire, noting with satisfaction how easily the chimney now drew. The coffee pot gleamed clean on the stove. Her patch of garden showed green promise. She'd come to Wyoming seeking security through marriage. To a stranger, instead, she'd found something different: self-reliance, community support, and perhaps in the quiet protection of Marcus Cole, the beginnings of something she hadn't dared hope for. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Autumn was advancing, winter would follow, and men like Caleb Owen existed in every frontier community. But tonight, in her restored cabin, with the memory of Marcus Cole's protection fresh in her mind, Sarah Jane Whitmore felt something she hadn't experienced since her arrival: genuine hope for what might come next. October arrived, with biting winds that whistled through every gap in the cabin's construction. Sarah woke before dawn, as had become her habit, to stoke the fire before the cold could fully penetrate her small sanctuary. Frost coated the windows in delicate patterns, reminding her that Wyoming's winter would be unlike anything she'd experienced. In Pennsylvania, the small garden she'd salvaged yielded its final harvest: winter squash, late carrots, and hardy greens that would need preserving before the ground froze solid. She'd learned to dry herbs, salt meat, and transform Rosa's teachings into practical skills that might sustain her through the coming months. "Morning," came Marcus's voice from outside. She'd grown accustomed to his dawn visits, though he never lingered long. "Coffee's fresh," she called through the door, adding automatically, "if you have time." She heard his boots on the porch, the rustle of movement. When she opened the door, she found him holding a large bundle of furs. "For the floor," he explained, "and walls if needed. Gets colder than you might think." Sarah accepted the bundle, surprised by its weight and the warmth still radiating from it. "Did you hunt these?" "Trapped. Part of winter preparations." He glanced past her into the cabin. "You've made good progress here." "Thanks to your help." She stepped aside. "Please come in. It's too cold to talk on the porch." For the first time, Marcus entered her cabin. His presence seemed to fill the small space, making everything appear more cramped, yet somehow safer. He moved carefully, aware of his size, accepting the coffee mug she offered. "Nice work on the chinking," he observed, running his hand along the wall where she'd sealed gaps with moss and mud. "I had a good teacher, indirectly." Sarah smiled, remembering his early roof repairs. "Though I'd welcome more direct instruction, if you're willing." Something shifted in Marcus's expression, not quite a surprise, but a kind of recalculation. "Winter is coming early this year. Signs are everywhere. You'll need more than basic repairs." "What kind of signs?" "Squirrels building, bigger nests, elk coming down from higher elevations. Even the tree bark feels different." He moved to the window. "Storms building now, big one, maybe 2-3 days." Sarah joined him, looking out at what seemed to her a normal autumn day. "I don't see anything." "You will. Question is, are you prepared?" The practical challenge energized her. "Tell me what I need." For the next hour, Marcus outlined winter survival with the patience of someone who'd done it countless times alone. Food preservation priorities, fuel requirements, emergency protocols for blizzard conditions. Sarah took notes on precious paper, asking questions that revealed both her ignorance and her determination to learn. "You're taking this seriously," he commented, a note of approval in his voice. "I have to. There's no one else to rely on." She hesitated, then added, though I appreciate having someone to learn from. Teaching is easier than explaining after. The fact. Marcus finished his coffee, setting the mug carefully on her small table. Storm hits tomorrow, probably. If you need help securing anything... Actually, there is something. Sarah moved to the door, gesturing outside. The barn door. One hinge is broken. I've managed to prop it closed, but in a real storm. I'll fix it today. He was already pulling on his gloves. Anything else? The root cellar entrance sticks. Takes all my strength to open it. I'll look. At that too. After he left, Sarah found herself humming while she worked, a habit she'd lost during her mother's illness and the desperate months following. There was something comforting about Marcus's competence, his willingness to share knowledge without condescension. She spent the day implementing his suggestions, moving firewood closer to the cabin, double-checking her preserved food inventory, preparing emergency supplies in case she couldn't reach the barn for days. When Marcus returned in the afternoon with tools, she worked alongside him, learning how to properly hang a heavy door, how to adjust the fit of wooden frames that had swollen with moisture. "You learn quick," he remarked as she successfully completed a repair under his guidance. "I had to learn many things quickly these past months." She handed him another tool, though carpentry wasn't among them until recently. Everyone has different skills, just a matter of applying them. What skills did you have before ranching? Marcus paused in his work, the question seemingly unexpected. Was a soldier for a while. Army taught me structure, discipline. Those transfer to ranch work. The war, Sarah asked gently. Some of it. His response discouraged further inquiry, so she changed subjects. Rosa mentioned you own the Circle S. Is it large? Big enough for one person, small enough to manage alone. He tested. The repaired hinge. There. Should hold through anything winter throws at it. As predicted, the storm arrived the next morning. Sarah woke to wind that shook the cabin and snow falling in sheets so thick she couldn't see the barn 20 feet away. She'd followed Marcus's advice, preparing hot food early while she still could, filling water containers, organizing supplies within easy reach. The temperature dropped dramatically. The newly installed furs proved their worth, holding warmth against walls that would otherwise seep cold. Sarah fed the fire regularly, reading by lamplight, working on mending that required no natural light. On the second day, a knock startled her. She opened the door to find Marcus, snow-covered and leading a pack horse. "Checking on you," he said simply. "Come in, please. You must be freezing." He stamped snow from his boots and entered, shaking ice crystals from his coat. "Just wanted to make sure you're managing. Better than I expected, thanks to your preparations." She poured hot coffee, noting his slight shiver. "How do you travel in this?" "Carefully. Know the landscape well enough to navigate. But I won't stay long. Storm's got more to deliver." They sat by the fire, the storm creating an intimate atmosphere, despite the formal distance between them. Sarah noticed details she'd missed before. A scar along Marcus's left hand, the way he held his coffee mug with both hands, the careful way he chose words as if each one were precious. "Can I ask you something?" she ventured. He nodded. "Why do you live alone? I mean, many ranchers take wives, hire hands. You seem to prefer solitude." Marcus stared into the fire for a long moment. "Solitude simpler. No one to worry about except yourself. No one to disappoint. That sounds lonely. Different things trouble different people." He glanced at her. "What made you answer a stranger's letters? That's a kind of solitude, too." "Fair point." Sarah considered her response. "Fear, honestly. Fear of starving, of having nowhere to go, of burden on others. The letters promised security, even if they proved false. And now? Now." She looked around her small, warm cabin. "Now I'm learning that security might be something different than what I thought I needed." Marcus finished his coffee and prepared to leave. At the door, he pulled a wrapped package. From his coat, almost forgot. Rosa sent this, said you'd need it before winter truly sets in. Sarah unwrapped the gift to find thick wool yarn in muted earth tones. For knitting, came Rosa's note. Winters are long. Keeping your hands busy helps. Tell her thank you, Sarah said, touched by the thoughtfulness. She's asked me to bring you to town next week, after this storm passes. Says there's things you'll need before winter locks us all in. You'll take me, if you want to go. After he left, Sarah ran her fingers through the soft yarn. Rosa's gift represented more than practical necessity. It was a connection to the community, an acknowledgement that she belonged here enough to warrant investment in her comfort. The storm lasted 3 days. When it finally cleared, the world had transformed into a crystalline landscape of pristine white. Sarah's first venture outside required effort to push through drifts against the door. The cold bit at her exposed skin, but the beauty took her breath away. True to his word, Marcus arrived a week later with a wagon rather than his usual horse. Town day, he announced. Roads are clear enough. The journey to Stormwind Creek took 90 minutes, allowing Sarah to truly appreciate the vastness of the territory. Marcus pointed out landmarks, explained seasonal changes in the landscape, shared practical knowledge about navigation and weather signs. You know this land intimately, she observed. 10 years makes a place part of you. He guided the wagon around a snowdrift, or you become part of it. In town, Sarah experienced the curious sensation of being simultaneously invisible and observed. Men tipped their hats politely, but avoided eye contact. Women's gazes lingered with undisguised curiosity. Rosa greeted her warmly at Murphy's General Store, immediately pulling her aside for private conversation. "How are you really managing?" Rosa asked, her voice low. "Truth, now." "Better than I expected. Marcus has been—" Sarah searched for the right words. "He's been invaluable." Rosa's eyebrows rose. "Marcus Cole helping someone so regularly, that's unusual. He says neighbors help neighbors. Neighbors help neighbors in emergencies. What Marcus does for you is different." Rosa studied her face. "Do you understand what people are beginning to say?" Heat crept up Sarah's neck. "No. That Marcus Cole, who hasn't looked twice at a woman since he arrived here, is courting Sarah Whitmore in his own peculiar way. That's ridiculous. He barely speaks to me. Sometimes actions matter more than words." Rosa's expression grew serious. "I'm not gossiping to embarrass you, but you should know that Caleb Owen has been suggesting Marcus has claimed you." "Claimed me? Like property? That's frontier thinking for some men. Owen's been telling anyone who'll listen that Cole's interference prevents other interested parties from paying court." Sarah felt anger rise. "I'm not interested in anyone's court, least of all Caleb Owen's." "Good. But be careful. Owen's pride is wounded, and winter isolation can make men reckless. Their shopping expedition yielded wool blankets, additional preserved foods, medicine supplies, and sturdy boots better suited to Wyoming winters than her eastern shoes." Marcus waited patiently, loading purchases into the wagon, occasionally offering opinions about quality or usefulness. At the apothecary, Sarah noticed him examining a display of patent medicines with unusual attention. "Looking for something specific?" she asked. "Wintertime ailments," he responded. "Easier to prevent than cure out here." "Sound advice. Back in Pennsylvania, my mother's illness taught me the value of preventive care." "What kind of illness?" "Consumption." The word still carried weight. 2 years of watching her fade, trying everything, doctors, medicines, home remedies. "I'm sorry." Simple words, but his tone conveyed genuine understanding. "My brother died of lung fever. Out here, no doctors, no medicines, just watching and hoping." The shared experience of loss created a moment of deeper connection. Sarah found herself looking at Marcus with new understanding. His solitude wasn't just preference, it was protection against further loss. As they prepared to leave town, Murphy flagged them down from his store. "Mrs. Whitmore, letter arrived for you." Sarah accepted the envelope with trembling hands. The return address read, Philadelphia. Her heart sank. Probably another bill collector or legal notice about her mother's remaining debts. "Bad news?" Marcus asked, noting her expression. "I'm afraid to open it. Want privacy?" She considered refusing, but something in his steady presence gave her courage. "No, it's fine." Breaking the seal, she quickly scanned the contents. Relief flooded through her. "It's from my mother's church. They've collected money to help with her final debts, more than enough to cover what I owe." Tears pricked her eyes. "I've been carrying that burden since I left." "Good news, then." "More than good. It means I'm truly free to start over here." She folded the letter carefully, "though I have mixed feelings about accepting charity. Community taking care of its own isn't charity. It's my responsibility." Marcus helped her into the wagon. Like neighbors helping neighbors, the journey back passed in comfortable silence, broken occasionally by Marcus pointing out animal tracks in the snow or explaining how to read the approaching weather. Sarah found herself studying his profile, the strong jaw, the way he scanned the landscape constantly, always aware, always vigilant. "Marcus," she said as they neared her cabin, "why haven't you taken a wife, if you don't mind my asking?" His hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the reins. "Never found the right fit." "Is it because of your brother and your sister Sarah?" He pulled the wagon to a stop outside her cabin, turning to look at her directly. "Maybe partly, but mostly because I never met anyone who understood what life out here really means. The isolation, the danger, the constant work." He paused. "Until recently, the implication hung between them." Sarah felt her heartbeat quicken. "And recently?" "Recently, I've watched someone survive and adapt to circumstances that would break most people. Someone who faces challenges head-on rather than complaining about them." His grey eyes held hers steadily. "Makes a man reconsider his position on solitude." The moment stretched, loaded with possibility and uncertainty. Sarah broke eye contact first, sudden shyness overtaking her usual directness. "Well," she said, gathering her packages, "thank you for the trip to town, and for the education in letter interpretation." Marcus smiled, actually smiled, a rare expression that transformed his serious features. "Any time, neighbor." After he left, Sarah sat by her fire, processing the day's revelations. The town gossip, Marcus's increasing openness, his oblique suggestion of changing feelings. In Philadelphia, such matters would be handled through formal courtship, chaperoned visits, clear social protocols. Here on the Wyoming frontier, relationships formed differently, through practical assistance, shared hardships, quiet gestures that spoke louder than flowery declarations. Over the following weeks, as winter deepened its grip on the territory, Marcus's visits became more frequent and slightly longer. He taught her to read weather patterns, to track wildlife, to distinguish between wind that meant snow and wind that meant clear skies. She, in turn, shared her growing collection of books, medical texts, herbalism guides, and novels that provided escape during long winter evenings. Their conversations evolved beyond practical matters. He spoke of his years moving cattle, encounters with native tribes, the loneliness that preceded her arrival. She described life as a preacher's daughter, her years teaching school, dreams she'd harbored before duty to her dying mother consumed everything. "You could teach here," Marcus mentioned, one afternoon while helping her repair a torn harness. Several families homestead too far from town for regular school attendance. "I've thought about it." Sarah tested the repair. "But winter makes travel impossible, and I'm not sure I'm ready to commit to staying permanently. Because of what people say, Owen's implications? Because she struggled for honesty. Because I came here for one reason that proved false. I don't want to stay for the wrong reasons again. What would be the right reasons? His directness caught her off guard. I'd want to stay because I choose this life, this place, because I have genuine purpose and not just survival necessity. Because, she faltered, unsure how to express the growing attachment she felt to this harsh land and the quiet man who'd become its anchor. Because, he prompted gently, because somewhere along the way, surviving stopped being enough. I want to build something lasting. Marcus nodded slowly. Building takes commitment from everyone involved. The cryptic response left her wondering about his own commitment to his ranch, to solitude, to whatever was developing between them. As November advanced, Sarah's competence grew daily. She could now start fires efficiently, chop wood without injury, preserve food using various methods, and identify dozens of local plants by their winter characteristics. Her body had adapted to the physical demands, growing stronger and more resilient. But beyond practical skills, she discovered an internal strength she hadn't known existed. The woman who had fled Philadelphia in desperation had transformed into someone capable of facing isolation, harsh weather, and social challenges with increasing confidence. One evening, while they sat by her fire sharing soup, Marcus asked, "Do you ever regret leaving Pennsylvania?" "How can I regret what brought me here?" Sarah replied. "Yes, the first weeks were terrifying. But look at what I've learned, what I've become." She gestured around the cabin. "I've built something from ruins. That's not nothing." "It's everything," Marcus said quietly. "Takes courage most people don't have. Maybe desperation and courage look similar from the outside. There's a difference. Desperation makes you run. Courage makes you stand and build." Their eyes met across the small table. In the firelight, Sarah saw something she'd been too afraid to acknowledge. Not just admiration or protective instinct, but growing affection. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. "Marcus," she began, then stopped, unsure how to voice the questions spinning through her mind. "Yeah? Nothing. Just thank you for everything." He reached across the table, his work-roughened hand covering hers briefly. "Thank you for staying." The simple gesture carried more weight than any declaration. After he left that night, Sarah sat alone, her hand still warm from his touch. Winter was coming. Dark, cold, isolating. But for the first time since her desperate journey west, she wasn't afraid of what it might bring. December painted the windows with elaborate frost patterns that shifted daily as temperatures fluctuated wildly. Sarah had developed morning rituals that anchored her days: fire building, coffee brewing, checking on the animals that had been left in her care. Rosa's rooster, several chickens that provided precious eggs, and 2 goats that had wandered onto her property during a storm and never left. Marcus arrived just past dawn, one particularly cold morning, his hat and shoulders white with fresh snow. "Morning livestock check," he announced, though his care for her animals had become expected rather than optional. "They're all huddled in the barn," Sarah reported. "Goats especially don't appreciate the weather. Together they mucked stalls, distributed hay, and broke ice on water troughs. Working beside him had become natural, their movements coordinated through repetition. "Storm is coming again," Marcus observed, studying the sky. "Different kind, though. Ice storm, most likely." "How can you tell?" "Temperatures hovering right at freezing. Wind patterns. Birds acting strange." He secured the barn door. "You'll want to gather extra water buckets. Ice can coat everything, making the well hard to access." "I'll do that today." Sarah brushed hay from her skirt. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Always do." "Earlier, Rosa mentioned you haven't... That is, people notice you spending time here? Are you concerned about your reputation?" He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. My reputation survived worse than helping a neighbor. I don't want to cause you difficulty, Sarah. The use of her first name stopped her breath. Whatever difficulties arise, they're worth facing. The intensity in his voice demanded a response. Worth it how? Worth it because... He paused, seeming to wage an internal battle. Because I haven't felt this invested in anything beyond my ranch and cattle in many years. Invested in what? In someone else's welfare, in conversation beyond weather and cattle prices, in... He looked away, in the possibility that solitude might not be the only way to live. Sarah's pulse quickened. Possibility isn't commitment. No, but it's a start. They stood in the cold barn, the weight of unspoken words between them. Finally, Marcus broke the moment. I should check your cabin stove. And look at that window you mentioned rattling. Inside, as he adjusted the damper and examined the troublesome window, Sarah found herself observing details she'd trained herself to ignore. The careful way he moved in her small space, the competence of his hands as he worked, the occasional glance in her direction when he thought she wasn't looking. There's something else, she said abruptly, about investing in possibilities. He straightened from examining the window frame. What about it? I'm scared. The admission cost her, but honesty demanded expression. Not of the isolation or the weather or even Caleb Owen. I'm scared of making another mistake, reading situations wrong, wanting things too much. Afraid I'm another Thomas Brennan? No. Afraid I might care too much to see clearly. Marcus considered. This his expression thoughtful. What would seeing clearly look like? The question surprised her with its complexity. Understanding motivations, yours and mine. Knowing the difference between gratitude and other feelings. Being certain about what I truly want, not just what feels safe or comfortable. Those are fair concerns. He moved to her small table, picking up a carved wooden figure he'd brought weeks earlier. A gift he'd claimed was just something I made during slow evenings. My motivations are simple, he continued. I want to help because it's the right thing to do. I keep coming back because... He paused, turning the carved figure in his hands. Because somewhere between fixing your roof and teaching you to read winter signs, I started looking forward to these visits more than anything else in my day. The honesty in his voice struck her like a physical force. And my motivations? She asked softly. Only you know those. His grey eyes met hers directly. But from where I stand, you've built a life here through your own strength. You don't need anyone, which makes choosing to let someone in, well, that means something. The conversation drifted into the afternoon, touching on dreams abandoned and hopes reformed, on the surprising resilience required for frontier life, on the ways hardship could strengthen or break the human spirit. By evening, the predicted ice storm had begun, coating every surface with a crystal shell that caught the last rays of sunlight like prisms. I should go before this gets worse, Marcus said, though he made no immediate move toward the door. Be careful on the ride home. Always am. He pulled on his heavy coat. Sarah, what you said about being scared to see clearly, that's not a weakness, it's wisdom. After he left, Sarah prepared for the storm, filling water buckets, banking the fire, reviewing emergency supplies. But her mind remained on the conversation, on moments of startling honesty, on the gradual evolution of their relationship from necessity to something approaching choice. The ice storm lasted 2 days, transforming the world into a treacherous, beautiful sculpture. When Marcus failed to appear on the 3rd day, Sarah experienced her first real anxiety since Owen's threatening visit. By afternoon, she was pacing her small cabin, inventing increasingly dire explanations for his absence. Just before sunset, She heard his familiar knock. Relief flooded through her as she opened the door to find him apparently unharmed, though more weather-beaten than usual. "You're all right," she said without thinking. "Tree down on the main trail. Had to find a way around." He stamped ice from his boots. "Were you worried?" "Of course not." The lie was automatic, protective. "I mean, no more than any neighbor worries about another during severe weather." His expression suggested he saw through the pretense. "Good. To know you'd worry about any neighbor the same way. Marcus Cole, are you teasing me?" "Maybe a little." The admission came with another rare smile. "Figured I owed you some teasing after all the practical lessons." This lighter version of Marcus caught her completely off guard. "Well, now I'm truly worried. You've developed a sense of humor." "Always had one. Just takes the right company to. You bring it out." They spent the evening in comfortable conversation, the ease between them marking how far they'd traveled from awkward exchanges over necessary repairs. Sarah found herself laughing more than she had since her mother's illness, sharing stories from her teaching days, learning about Marcus's early years on a family farm in Colorado. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "Your family farm?" "Sometimes. Mostly I miss the certainty of it, knowing your place, your role." He stared into the fire. "The frontier offers freedom but demands constant choice. Gets exhausting." "I understand that. In Philadelphia, my path was clear: daughter, teacher, caregiver. Simple, even if not always pleasant. Here," she gestured around the cabin, "here I have to decide everything. It's liberating and overwhelming. Is that why you answered Brennan's letters? For certainty? For survival initially, but yes, certainty too. The promise of a defined role, wife, homemaker, someone's responsibility rather than my own. And now?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Now, I'm not sure I want to be anyone's responsibility in that way again. I'd rather choose partnership, contribution, mutual support." Marcus nodded slowly. "Makes a man think about his own expectations." "What expectations?" "About what marriage might mean. Traditional roles versus something different." The conversation had wandered into territory that made Sarah's heartbeat erratic. And what would something different look like? Two people building something together, equal stakes, shared decisions. Respecting each other's strength rather than assuming weakness needs protecting. That sounds ideal, but complicated. Most worthwhile things are complicated. They let the topic settle, but Sarah sensed a shift in the atmosphere, an acknowledgement that their speculation had become decidedly less theoretical. As winter deepened, their routine solidified into something approaching domestic partnership, though neither acknowledged it directly. Marcus visited most mornings, often staying for meals. Sarah began cooking larger portions, setting two places automatically. They developed systems for managing tasks. He continued major repairs and heavy labor while she handled fine detail work, record keeping, and medical care for minor injuries or illnesses that affected either household. The turning point arrived during a blizzard in mid-December. Sarah had been fighting a persistent cold, the cabin's dampness exacerbating the cough that kept her awake nights. When Marcus arrived for his morning visit, he found her pale and feverish. "You're sick," he stated, setting down firewood with more force than necessary. "Just a cold. I'll be fine." Like hell. The curse surprised them both. "Temperature dropped 15 degrees last night. You can't afford to get sicker." "I'm managing, Sarah." He gripped her shoulders gently. "Let someone take care of you, for once." The fierce protectiveness in his voice, the unusual use of her first name, the genuine worry in his eyes, all combined to break through her automatic self-reliance. She nodded, suddenly too tired to maintain independence. What followed was the strangest and sweetest experience of her adult life. Marcus took charge with gentle efficiency, banking fires higher than usual, preparing medicinal tea from herbs she'd dried, positioning her in the warmest part of the cabin with extra blankets. When her cough worsened, he surprised her with a bottle of honey. "Where did you get this?" she asked, accepting the precious sweetener. "Town. Yesterday. Thought you might need it." "You went to town in that storm? Just for honey?" "Among other things." He avoided her gaze, suddenly seeming unsure of himself. As the day progressed, her fever worsened. Marcus stayed, despite her protests about propriety. He moved the rocking chair beside her makeshift daybed, reading aloud from newspapers and catalogues, maintaining conversation when she was awake, keeping watch when she dozed. Evening brought a spike in her fever that left her disoriented. Through the haze, she was aware of Marcus's steady presence, his quiet competence. At one point, she woke to find him applying a cool cloth to her forehead with careful tenderness. "You don't have to—" she began. "Hush." His voice was soft but firm. "Rest now." She drifted back to sleep, dimly aware of his large presence in her small cabin, the safety his vigilance provided. When she woke fully the next morning, her fever had broken. Sunlight streamed through frost-covered windows, and Marcus dozed in the rocking chair, fully dressed, his long legs stretched toward the fire. The sight struck her as both touching and somehow right. This strong, solitary man choosing to spend an uncomfortable night caring for her. "Marcus," she whispered. He woke instantly, immediately alert. "How do you feel?" "Better. Much better." She struggled to sit up. "Did you stay all night?" "Storm was bad. Didn't want to leave you alone." He rubbed his neck, obviously stiff from the chair's confines. "Fever broke around 3. You didn't have to—" "Stop." The word was gentle but decisive. "Stop saying, 'I don't have to, maybe I don't have to, but I wanted to.' There's a difference." The simple declaration hung between them, more profound than any romantic speech might have been. Sarah felt something shift irrevocably in her heart. Not just gratitude, but deep affection, trust, and something stronger she wasn't quite ready to name. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For staying. For caring. For—" she gestured, helplessly. "For being who you are." Marcus reached over, taking her hand in his larger one. "Sarah, I'm not good with words. Never have been. But these past months, watching you build something from nothing, seeing your strength, your determination." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I haven't felt this way about anyone ever. It's not just admiration or protective instinct, it's more." Her breath caught. "Marcus, let me finish." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I know you came here looking for security through marriage. I know you've been disappointed and had to rebuild your life. I don't want to pressure you or assume anything, but I need you to know what I feel. It's not an obligation or temporary companionship, it's love," she whispered. He nodded, his eyes steady on hers. "Yes, love." The word settled into the warm cabin like benediction. Sarah squeezed his hand, feeling tears prick her eyes. "I thought I knew what I wanted when I came to Wyoming," she said slowly. "I thought I understood what marriage and partnership meant. But being here, struggling and building, having someone choose to stand beside me rather than own me—" She paused, gathering courage to match his honesty. "What I feel for you isn't what I expected to find. It's stronger and cleaner than what I thought I wanted." "And what do you want now?" Sarah looked around her simple cabin, thought of the land outside, the challenges they'd faced together, the quiet moments of understanding that had grown between them. "I want to keep building, with you. Not because I need protection or security, but because I choose you. Because these months have shown me the difference between surviving and truly living." Marcus lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. "That's all I needed to know." Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the world crystalline and still. Inside the cabin, something fundamental had shifted. The tentative dance of cautious attraction had transformed into acknowledged love, built on a foundation of respect, shared hardship, and freely given choice. "I should let you rest more," Marcus said, though he made no move to release her hand. "You should probably go home. Check on your own place," Sarah agreed, equally reluctant to break the moment. "Probably should." He smiled, the expression transforming, his weathered features into something unexpectedly boyish. "But I'd rather stay and make sure you're truly better." "Then stay," she said simply, and he did, the decision feeling less like impropriety than like the most natural thing in the world. They spent the day in quiet companionship, talking little, but understanding much. By evening, Sarah was strong, enough to prepare a proper meal, which they shared at her small table as ice crystals painted fantastic landscapes on the windows. "Sarah," Marcus said as they cleared dishes, "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About spring, about the future." He set down the plates carefully. "About asking you properly to marry me." Her heart skipped, though the question wasn't entirely unexpected. "And what would properly look like?" "Well, for starters, I'd give you time to fully recover. And I'd want you to be certain it's what you want, not just the convenient or expected choice." "I see." She couldn't help smiling at his careful consideration. "And then?" "Then I'd probably botch some formal proposal, stutter through prepared words, and hope you'd say yes anyway." "Marcus Cole, are you planning to propose to me?" "Not today. Today I'm just letting you know my intentions, so you have time to think, consider, decide if it's truly what you want." Sarah moved closer, placing her hand flat against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat strong and steady. "What if I don't need time to think?" "Everyone needs time to think about life-changing decisions." "The decision has already changed my life." She looked up at him, noting the hope and uncertainty mingling in his grey eyes. "Every choice I've made since arriving here led to this moment, and every moment with you has shown me that love doesn't require dramatic declarations or perfect certainty. It requires daily choice, mutual respect, and willingness to build something lasting together." "Is that a yes to a future proposal, or are you just clarifying your philosophy on love?" His tone was light, but she could sense the importance of her answer. "It's a promise that when you do propose, properly and with all your prepared words, my answer will be yes." Relief and joy transformed his expression. Marcus pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers in an intimate gesture that spoke louder than words. "That's all I need to know," he repeated, echoing his earlier declaration. Standing in her small cabin in the heart of a Wyoming winter, Sarah Jane Whitmore realized she had found everything she'd thought she was seeking in Thomas Brennan's false letters, but through an entirely different path than she'd imagined. Security wasn't just shelter and food. It was knowing someone had chosen to stand beside her through whatever came. Love wasn't just companionship, it was the daily decision to build something lasting with someone who saw her strength rather than just her need. As they moved apart to finish evening chores, Sarah caught a glimpse of herself in the small mirror above her washstand. The woman looking back was different from the desperate widow who'd arrived months. Christmas approached with the kind of deep winter that tested even experienced pioneers. Sarah had recovered fully from her illness, though the experience had accelerated. Something between her and Marcus that might have taken months to develop under normal circumstances. Now they moved around each other with an awareness that transcended mere friendship. Touches lingered slightly longer, glances held deeper meaning, and unspoken promises hung in the air like a comfortable warmth. The morning of December 22nd brought unusual weather, a sudden warming that turned snow to slush and created treacherous conditions across the territory. Sarah was preparing bread in the cabin when she heard horses approaching at unusual speed. Through the window she saw Ned, Caleb Owen's nervous companion from their previous encounter, riding hard toward the cabin. He reined in abruptly, sliding from his mount before the horse fully stopped. "Mrs. Whitmore," he called, his voice cracking with panic. "There's been an accident. Marcus Cole." Sarah's heart stopped. She threw open the door, flour still coating her hands. "What's happened? Is he hurt?" "Bad ice storm damage. Tree fell on him while he was trying to clear the main road. Doc in town's out delivering the Mackenzie baby. Won't be back till tomorrow at earliest." Ned's words tumbled over each other. "He's conscious, but, well, there's blood." Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed her coat and the medical supplies she'd accumulated. "Take me to him, now." "But, Mom, it's dangerous to travel, and you're a woman. I can help." She fixed him with a stare that brooked no argument. "Unless you'd rather let him bleed while we debate my gender." Ned's eyes widened at her uncharacteristic sharpness. "No, ma'am, I'll take you." The ride tested every skill Marcus had taught her about reading dangerous terrain. Melting snow had created deceptive pools hiding deep mud. Ice-laden branches dropped without warning. Ned guided them along paths Sarah would never have attempted alone. They found Marcus in a clearing beside the main road where a massive cottonwood had split under its ice load. One section had trapped his leg, and his attempts to free himself had left him bloodied and exhausted. But his grey eyes found hers immediately when she approached, relief flickering across his pain-tightened features. "Sarah," his voice was rough, "you shouldn't be out in this." "Neither should you, apparently." She knelt beside him, her medical training taking over. The tree had struck his left thigh and pinned his lower leg. Blood seeped through his trousers, but his color remained good. "Ned, I need you to help me lift this branch. Just enough for him to slide free." "I tried that already," Marcus protested. "Weighs too much." "You tried alone." Sarah positioned herself for leverage. 1, 2, 3. Working together, they managed to lift the branch just enough for Marcus to drag himself clear. His leg immediately collapsed beneath his weight, and Sarah caught him before he could fall completely. "Let me look at this properly." She propped him against a standing tree and carefully cut away the torn fabric of his trousers. The wound was deep but clean, a long gash from knee to ankle that would require stitching. But first, they needed to get him to a proper shelter. "We can't get him to town in this weather," Ned said, voicing what Sarah already knew. "And he can't ride." "My cabin's closer." Sarah made rapid calculations. "Can you fashion a travois? Something to pull him?" For the next hour they worked in the failing light, using fallen branches and Marcus's own rope to construct a makeshift sled. Marcus remained conscious throughout, directing their efforts with characteristic efficiency, despite obvious pain. Sarah improvised a pressure bandage from her petticoat, stemming the worst of the bleeding. The journey back to her cabin pushed the limits of human endurance. Sarah walked ahead, leading Marcus's horse, while Ned guided the travois over treacherous ground. Marcus gritted his teeth through jolts that must have sent pain shooting through his leg, never once complaining. Full darkness had fallen by the time they reached the cabin. Getting Marcus inside and onto her bed required combined effort that left all three of them exhausted. Sarah immediately set about heating water, gathering needles and thread, creating as sterile an environment as possible. "You've done enough, Ned," she told Owen's companion. "Get yourself home safe." "Actually, ma'am." Ned hesitated in the doorway. "I think I should stay, in case you need help. And, well, folks will talk if I leave you alone with him." Sarah very nearly laughed at the absurdity. "Let them talk, but your help would be appreciated." Over the next several hours, she worked with fierce concentration, cleaning and stitching Marcus's wound, using techniques recalled from her mother's medical books. Her hands remained steady despite the intimacy of working over his bare leg, despite. His occasional grunt of pain, despite the weight of responsibility she carried. "You're good at this," Marcus observed through clenched teeth as she placed the final stitch. "Necessity is an excellent teacher." She bound the wound with strips of clean cotton. "Though I wouldn't recommend testing my skills further." No plans. 2. By midnight, Marcus's fever had begun to set in. Sarah sent Ned to sleep in the barn, then settled into the rocking chair beside the bed with cool cloths and willow bark tea. Through the night, she monitored his temperature, changed his bandages, and watched his face for signs of increasing distress. "Sarah?" His voice emerged rough from sleep. "You're still here." "Where else would I be?" "Home. Your own bed." His eyes found hers in the dim firelight. "You've done more than enough. Marcus Cole, stop telling me what I've done enough of." She refreshed the cloth on his forehead. "When will you understand that I choose to be here?" "Old habits," he admitted with a weak smile, not used to anyone choosing to stick around when things get difficult. "I've discovered I'm not like most people." She settled back in the chair. "Besides, someone needs to keep you from attempting any more heroic tree-clearing expeditions." For 3 days, Sarah barely left his side. The fever came in waves, requiring constant vigilance. She prepared broths, changed dressings, administered medicines, and watched for signs of infection. Ned proved unexpectedly helpful, assisting with heavy lifting, feeding the animals, and eventually, to Sarah's surprise, defending her competence to visitors who stopped by to check on Marcus. "She knows what she's doing," she overheard him saying, to Caleb Owen, who had arrived on the 4th day. "Probably saved Marcus's life the way he was bleeding." "Still not proper," Owen replied, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. "Proper or not, she's doing what needs doing," Ned responded firmly. "That's more than can be said for talking about it." Sarah filed away this unexpected support from an unlikely source. Frontier life had a way of reshaping social expectations when practical necessity intervened. By the 5th day, Marcus's fever broke and his leg showed signs of proper healing. Sarah finally allowed herself to rest, dropping into exhausted sleep in the chair beside his bed. She woke to find a blanket carefully draped over her, and Marcus watching her with an expression of quiet tenderness. "Morning," he said softly. "How long?" She straightened, immediately checking his bandages. "You've been out for about 10 hours. Ned's been playing nurse rather badly." "His cooking, probably, I suspect." She smiled, noting the color had returned to Marcus's face. "How are you feeling?" "Like I wrestled with a tree and partially lost." He shifted, testing his mobility. "But alive, thanks to you. Thanks to both of us." And Ned. Never thought Caleb, Owen's sidekick, would become my ally. Marcus's expression grew thoughtful. "Seems like a crisis brings out surprising truths in people." Over the following week, their unconventional household settled into temporary normalcy. Marcus remained bedridden, his legs still requiring careful management. Sarah maintained her nursing routine while Ned assisted with outdoor chores and gradually became something of a confidant. "I shouldn't have been riding with Owen that first day," Ned admitted one afternoon while helping Sarah prepare dinner. "Knew his intentions weren't right, but he pays well for help and winter work's scarce." "We all make compromises for survival," Sarah replied. "The question is how we respond when we see something wrong." "You never compromise, do you? I mean, you've built all this," he gestured around the cabin, "on your own terms. I compromise daily, but only with circumstances, not with what I believe is right." Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus calling from the bedroom, needing help adjusting his position. As Sarah left to assist him, she caught Ned's thoughtful expression. The young man was clearly reassessing his allegiances. That evening, as the three of them shared dinner, now a comfortable routine, the door burst open without warning. Caleb Owen stood on the threshold, snow swirling behind him, his expression thunderous. "Ned, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Ned stood slowly, his earlier uncertainty replaced by determination. "Helping neighbors, Caleb. Same as anyone would. This isn't neighborly. This is—" Owen's gaze swept the domestic scene. Sarah at the table, Marcus propped in bed, Ned in between. "This is unseemly. And what kind of example does it set, having two unmarried women in the same household?" "The example of people helping each other through crisis," Sarah said calmly. "Something that seems to confuse those who measure everything in terms of ownership and propriety." "Watch your tongue, woman. You don't know what kind of trouble you're courting." Marcus attempted to rise from the bed, though the movement clearly pained him. "Owen, I suggest you watch your own tongue. And if you have something to say about this situation, say it to me directly. Can't say much to a man flat on his back, can I?" Owen's smile held no warmth. "But I can say plenty to the town council about unnatural arrangements and the need for proper oversight of unmarried women." "Threats, Caleb?" Ned spoke up, surprising everyone, including himself. "You'd threaten people for helping each other?" "I'd protect community standards." Owen's attention fixed on his former hired hand. "And I thought I could count on your loyalty." "I'm loyal to what's right." Ned straightened his shoulders. "And right now, that means supporting Mrs. Whitmore and Marcus." The confrontation that followed revealed the true nature of Owen's character. His objections had nothing to do with propriety and everything to do with control. He'd spent months positioning himself as the arbiter of acceptable behavior in isolated territories, using social pressure to manipulate situations to his advantage. But he hadn't counted on Sarah's integrity, Marcus's quiet strength, or Ned's emerging conscience. When the argument crescendoed, with Owen demanding Sarah accompany him to town for her own safety, Marcus managed to lever himself to standing, using the bedpost for support, but projecting unmistakable authority. "You'll leave now," Marcus said, his voice carrying a tone that ended arguments. "And you'll spread whatever lies you think are necessary. But know this, if you attempt to harm Sarah through gossip or pressure, you'll answer to more than just me." Empty threats from a crippled man. "Try me." The simple challenge, delivered with absolute conviction, deflated Owen's bluster. He left with a final warning about the consequences of defying community expectations, but his exit lacked the impact he'd intended. After he was gone, the cabin fell silent. Marcus sank back onto the bed, pale from exertion. Ned paced nervously. Sarah simply moved to lock the door, a precaution she'd never felt necessary before. "I'm sorry," Marcus said finally. "You're going to face difficulty because of me." "No," Sarah shook her head firmly. "I'll face difficulty because I choose to do what's right. There's a difference. Still, maybe I should go to town, stay at Murphy's or find other arrangements." "With that leg? You'd be playing right into Owen's hands, appearing guilty when you've done nothing but receive necessary medical care." "She's right," Ned added quietly. "And for what it's worth, I'll back your version of events, both of yours." Sarah looked at the young man with new appreciation. "Thank you, Ned. That means more than you might realize." "Owen's been pushing people around for years," Ned continued. "Maybe it's time someone stood up to him." Over the following days, the consequences became apparent. Owen had indeed been spreading his version of events in town, painting Sarah as a temptress and Marcus as compromised by injury and infatuation. But to his surprise, the community response wasn't unanimous support. Rosa Martinez visited on the third day, bringing reinforcements in the form of two other women whose children Sarah had helped through various ailments. "We've come to check on our patients," Rosa announced, her tone daring anyone to question their motivation. "All of them. The women spent the afternoon in the cabin, their presence serving as both support and shield against further gossip. They examined Marcus's wound with approval, praised Sarah's medical skills, and made pointed observations about the cleanliness and organization of the household. Emma Phillips is organizing a petition, Rosa confided as they prepared to leave. Supporting your right to provide medical assistance without interference. Several families whose children you've treated are signing. I never intended to cause division in the community, Sarah replied. Sometimes division's necessary to clarify what a community really stands for, Rosa's sister Elena observed. You've shown us strength we didn't know existed in this place. Some people fear that. After they left, Sarah found herself sitting beside Marcus as daylight faded. His leg continued to heal, and he'd begun moving around the cabin with a makeshift crutch. But recovery would take weeks more. I never imagined medical knowledge would become a political issue, she mused. Everything becomes political when some people benefit from others' dependence. Marcus shifted to better see her face. But you've given people alternatives to Owen's idea of community. That's powerful. I just wanted to help when I could, and that's exactly why people trust you. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. Sarah, when this crisis passes, and it will, I want to make my proposal official. Not because of circumstances or defense against gossip, but because watching you these past months has convinced me that partnership with you would make me a better man. You don't need improving, she said softly. Everyone needs improving. The question is finding someone who inspires you to try. Their moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Sarah opened it to find Murphy, the store owner, holding his hat awkwardly. Sorry to disturb, Mrs. Whitmore, but there's a situation brewing in town. Owens called for a special council meeting tomorrow. Says it's about community standards and medical practice. He glanced past her to Marcus. Thought you should know. What kind of council meeting? The kind where they vote on things, regulations, restrictions. Murphy's expression was sympathetic. Owens pushing hard for rules about who can provide medical care, who can live alone, that sort of thing. After Murphy left, Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances heavy with understanding. The personal had indeed become political. I'm going to that meeting, Sarah declared. You might face worse than gossip. Owen's been building support. Then I'll build more. Sarah straightened her shoulders. I won't hide from this fight. We won't hide, Marcus corrected. If you're going, I'm going with you. Your leg. My leg is exactly why I need to be there. I'm living proof that your medical knowledge saves lives. His expression grew determined. Besides, it's time the community saw us together. Properly. Ned, who had overheard, cleared his throat. If you need more support at the meeting, you'll come? Sarah asked, surprised. Someone needs to bear witness to the truth. Ned's jaw set with newfound conviction. Might as well be me. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Word of the meeting spread quickly, and Sarah received unexpected visitors. Emma Phillips brought papers to sign, not just her petition, but statements from families Sarah had helped. Dr. Mitchell, an elderly man who occasionally visited Stormwind Creek for serious cases, stopped by to formally endorse her medical skills. You've done more for this community in a few months than some do in years, he told her. Don't let Owen's narrow thinking discourage you. By morning of the meeting, Sarah had gathered more support than she'd dared hope. But she also understood the stakes. Owen wasn't just challenging her position, he was testing the community's willingness to embrace change versus maintaining traditional control structures. She dressed carefully in her best blue dress, pinning her hair in a severe but neat style that projected competence rather than beauty. Marcus managed to wear proper clothes despite his healing leg, Ned having secretly retrieved them from his cabin. The ride to town was tense but determined. Sarah sat beside Marcus in a borrowed wagon, Ned driving, all three of them aware they were heading into a confrontation that would define more than just immediate circumstances. As they approached Stormwind Creek, Sarah was struck by the unusual number of people heading toward the municipal building. The turnout suggested Owen had succeeded in making this a pivotal community moment. "No matter what happens today," Marcus said quietly, touching her hand, "I want you to know you've already won something more important than any vote." "What's that?" "The respect of people who matter, including yourself." She squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his steady presence. "Then let's go show them what that respect looks like in action." As they pulled up to the building, Sarah saw familiar faces, some supportive, others uncertain, a few openly hostile. But for the first time since arriving in Wyoming, she felt no fear about facing judgment. She'd found her ground, her purpose, and her place in this community. Whatever Owen had planned, she was ready to meet it with the same strength that had carried her from a burned cabin to this moment of choice. The future remained unwritten, but Sarah Jane Whitmore was no longer the desperate widow who'd answered a false letter. She was a woman who had built something real from ruins, who had earned love through shared hardship, and who was prepared to fight for the life she'd chosen to create. The meeting would determine many things, but it wouldn't determine her worth or her right to choose her own path. As they entered the building together, Sarah, Marcus, and an unexpected ally in Ned, she realized the greatest transformation hadn't been in her circumstances, but in her understanding of what strength truly meant. It wasn't just endurance or independence, it was the courage to accept help, to offer care, and to stand firm when everything you'd built was challenged. Whatever happened next, she would face it not alone, but as part of a community she had helped shape and a partnership she had chosen. The burned cabin that had seemed like such disaster now felt like the foundation upon which everything good had been constructed. And that realization, more than any council vote, told her she was exactly where she needed to be. The doors opened, and Sarah Whitmore stepped forward to claim her place in the only community that had ever truly chosen her back. The municipal building buzzed with an energy Sarah had never witnessed in Stormwind Creek. Townspeople filled every available seat, spilling out onto the porch in clusters of animated conversation. The usual weekly council meetings drew perhaps a dozen residents. Today, it seemed the entire settlement had turned out. Sarah maintained composure as she entered, though her heart raced at the sea of faces. Some supportive, others coolly appraising, a few openly antagonistic. Marcus moved beside her with careful dignity, his improvised cane barely concealing his limp. Ned flanked her other side, his presence a steadying reminder that alliances could shift in unexpected directions. Council Chairman William Hayes called the meeting to order with visible nervousness. A former railroad man turned merchant, he clearly hadn't anticipated such controversy when Owen first approached him about clarifying community standards. "First matter of business," Hayes began, consulting hastily written notes, "concerns the establishment of formal regulations regarding medical practice within town limits and its environs." Owen stood immediately, having positioned himself strategically near the front. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As many know, recent events have raised questions about the safety and propriety of certain informal medical arrangements." His gaze deliberately swept towards Sarah as he continued. "While we all appreciate Mrs. Whitmore's good intentions, the fact remains that untrained individuals providing medical care pose risks to community health. Additionally, the living arrangements during recent crisis situations have tested our established social boundaries." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some agreeable, others dissenting. Sarah noticed Rosa Martinez shifting forward in her seat, clearly preparing to respond. "What specific regulations are you proposing, Mr. Owen?" council member Elizabeth Clark asked. The bank manager's wife had always maintained strict neutrality in community disputes, making her question significant. Owen retrieved a prepared document. 3 main provisions. First, all medical care within 30 miles of Stormwind Creek must be provided by licensed practitioners or under their direct supervision. Second, any unmarried residents requiring extended private care must be housed in public facilities or with blood relatives. Third, anyone challenging these provisions would be subject to censure and potential exclusion from community resources. The last provision elicited gasps. In this harsh environment, exclusion from communal support structures was effectively exile or death sentence. Before anyone could respond, Dr. Mitchell struggled to stand from his seat near the back. Age-spotted hands gripped his walking stick as the elderly physician commanded attention through sheer authority. "Gentlemen, ladies," his voice creaked but carried clearly, "I've practiced medicine for 47 years across 3 territories. During that time, I've witnessed countless individuals provide life-saving care with nothing but compassion and common sense." He paused, letting his words settle. Mrs. Whitmore's treatment of Marcus Cole's injuries demonstrated skills that would credit any formal medical academy. Her wound care, fever management, and preventive measures showed understanding many trained practitioners failed to achieve. Owen shifted uncomfortably but maintained his position. "With respect, Dr. Mitchell, good intentions don't replace proper credentials. The risk to community health—" "Risk!" Dr. Mitchell's interruption crackled with authority. "The only risk I see is denying capable individuals the right to help their neighbors. In my 47 years, I've never encountered community where rigid regulation improved healthcare. Desperation and pain don't wait for credentials." Rosa Martinez stood from the crowd. "Dr. Mitchell speaks truth. My youngest would have died from scarlet fever last autumn without Mrs. Whitmore's herbal knowledge. She recognized symptoms I missed, prepared poultices that brought the fever down before the doctor could reach us from 3 towns away." "It wasn't just medicine," another voice added. Sarah turned to see Emma Phillips clutching her baby. "Mrs. Whitmore taught me proper nutrition during pregnancy when I couldn't afford regular doctor visits. Everything I learned kept me and my child healthy." One by one, testimonials emerged from the crowd. Families whose children Sarah had treated for injuries and illnesses. Women who'd received guidance through difficult pregnancies. Men whose workplace injuries had been tended with skill that prevented serious complications. Owen's confident expression gradually shifted toward concern as the support outweighed opposition. He attempted to regain control. "These isolated cases, while touching, don't address the broader question of propriety. Housing arrangements that defy social convention." "What convention?" interrupted Thomas Murphy. The store owner stood deliberately, his ledger in hand. "I've documented every transaction in this town for 8 years. Mrs. Whitmore's purchases show exemplary household management, careful financial planning, and generous assistance to struggling families. Her behavior exemplifies everything we claim to value in community members." Ned surprised everyone by standing. "I've spent the past week in proximity to Mrs. Whitmore and Mr. Cole during his recovery. I witnessed nothing but proper medical care and mutual respect. Mr. Owen's implications about impropriety come from imagination, not observation." "You're biased," Owen shot back. "You've chosen sides in matters that don't concern you." "Sides?" Ned's voice gained strength. "I've chosen to support people who demonstrate Christian charity over those who manufacture scandal from necessity." The meeting's momentum had clearly shifted, leaving Owen frustrated and overreaching. He made his critical error by appealing to fear rather than principle. "All these emotional testimonials ignore fundamental truth," he declared, his voice rising. Allowing women to operate outside traditional boundaries threatens everything that keeps our society stable. First, they practice medicine. Then they reject marriage. Then they refuse proper authority. Where does it end? The naked misogyny in his statement catalyzed something in the room's atmosphere. Women who had remained silent exchanged glances loaded with recognition. Men who'd been neutral began reassessing Owen's motivations. Marcus chose this moment to stand, using his cane for support but projecting undeniable authority. Mr. Owen raises interesting questions about authority and tradition. His voice carried easily through the charged silence. Let me tell you what I've observed these past months. He moved forward slightly, his injury evident but not diminishing. His presence. I've watched Sarah Whitmore transform a burned ruin into a home through intelligence and determination. I've seen her adapt to this harsh environment with grace that humbles men twice her age. I've benefited personally from medical knowledge that preserved my leg and possibly my life. Sarah felt heat climb her neck as every gaze in the room focused. On her, Marcus continued, his words measured but passionate. Mr. Owen claims to defend tradition and community values. But what tradition excludes competent individuals from serving their neighbors? What values require women to rely on authority that fails them rather than skills they possess? The real threat to our community isn't capable women helping each other. It's men who would rather maintain control than allow progress. The silence following his statement held electric tension. Chairman Hayes cleared his throat, visibly wrestling. With competing pressures, are you proposing to marry Mrs. Whitmore? Owen demanded, playing what he clearly believed was a winning card. To legitimize these arrangements, I plan to propose marriage to Sarah Whitmore, Marcus replied calmly, when circumstances allow for proper courtship rather than crisis management. But my feelings for her exist independently of your regulations, and her value to this community transcends any man's claim to her, including mine. The room erupted in conversations as people processed these revelations. Sarah found herself momentarily overwhelmed by the public nature of declarations she'd expected to remain private. Chairman Hayes banged his gavel repeatedly. Order! Let's focus on the proposals at hand. But the dynamic had irrevocably shifted. Councilmember Clark, speaking with newfound decisiveness, addressed her colleagues directly. Gentlemen, I move to table Mr. Owen's regulations, pending thorough community discussion. These issues clearly require more consideration than emergency restrictions can address. Seconded, called John Bergen, the blacksmith who'd witnessed Sarah's care for numerous injuries in his dangerous profession. Furthermore, Mrs. Clark continued, turning toward Sarah, I propose we formally recognize Mrs. Whitmore's contributions to community health by endorsing her as auxiliary medical support until Dr. Mitchell or other licensed practitioners become permanently available. The motion received strong support, though Owen and two of his consistent allies voted against. But numbers had turned decisively in Sarah's favor. As the meeting concluded with Owen's proposals effectively defeated, emotional tension remained high. People lingered, forming clusters of conversation, processing the day's revelations. Several women approached Sarah directly, thanking her for services and support they apparently hadn't felt comfortable acknowledging publicly before. That took courage, Margaret Bennett told her, holding Sarah's hands firmly, standing up to men like Owen who think propriety matters more than survival. I never intended to challenge anyone, Sarah replied honestly. I simply tried to help when I could. Sometimes helping requires challenge, Mrs. Clark observed, joining their conversation. You've shown us possibilities we hadn't considered. That's rarely comfortable, but always necessary. As the crowd gradually dispersed, Sarah found herself alone with Marcus and Ned near the building's entrance. Afternoon sun slanted through dusty air, creating halos around their figures. "Well," she said finally, "that was unexpected." "The support or the opposition?" Marcus asked, leaning heavily on his cane. The day's exertions had clearly tired him. Both. All of it. She studied his face, noting new lines of fatigue. "Your defense was remarkable, though I appreciate the warning before making private matters public next time." "Desperate circumstances," he admitted with a slight smile. "But nothing I said wasn't true, including the proposal intentions." Ned cleared his throat awkwardly. "I should probably return to my own affairs. Let you two discuss things." "Ned," Sarah stopped him. "Thank you. Your testimony meant more, coming from someone without obvious bias. It took real courage." "Courage runs easier when you're supporting the right side," he replied, then grinned unexpectedly. "Besides, working with Caleb Owen never sat right. Today gave me an excuse to quit properly." After he left, Sarah and Marcus stood alone in the fading afternoon light. The adrenaline from confrontation was wearing off, leaving exhaustion and an odd sense of anticlimax. "Your leg must be screaming," she observed. "We should get you back to rest." "Sarah," he caught her arm gently. "Before we go back to practical matters, I need to know if I overstepped today, making private feelings public without consulting you." She considered the question seriously. "In normal circumstances, yes. But these weren't normal circumstances. Owen forced the issue into a public forum. You responded appropriately." "And the proposal part? The part where you said you intended to propose? Or the part where you emphasized my independence regardless of marriage?" Her voice carried gentle teasing. "Because both parts matter." Both parts were honest, then both parts were welcome. She linked her arm through his unoccupied one. "Though I reserve the right to actual consideration when you do propose properly. Wouldn't dream of assuming otherwise." His expression grew thoughtful as they began, walking toward their borrowed wagon. "Today changed things, though. Community dynamics, your position here, even my own standing. We'll face different pressures now. We've faced pressure before." "True. But victory sometimes brings more challenge than defeat. People will expect more from you now, have higher standards of behavior." Sarah helped him up into the wagon, noting his careful movements. People have always expected much from women while giving little in return. Today might have evened those scales slightly. As they rode back through the darkening landscape, conversation continued in fits and starts. Both were processing the day's events, its immediate victories, and longer-term implications. "What happens with your cabin?" Marcus asked eventually. "Everyone knows you're there now, knows what we've built together." "What we've built is a practical partnership turned to something deeper," Sarah replied. "Whether I continue living independently, or we formalize different arrangements, that foundation remains solid. And if community pressure increases, if Owen finds other ways to create difficulties, then we handle them together." She glanced at him in the growing darkness. "You once told me the frontier demands constant choice. I choose to stay, to continue helping when I can, and to build whatever future makes sense for both of us." "That sounds like acceptance of eventual marriage. That sounds like acceptance of partnership, with marriage being one possible formalization." She smiled at his answering chuckle. "Don't assume possession just because I weathered Owen's accusations successfully." "Never." His tone grew serious. "Though I will ask you properly when we're both recovered from this crisis, with flowers and prepared words and proper courting conventions. I look forward to critiquing your technique." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon wheels finding familiar ruts in the road. Sarah reflected on the day's transformations, from facing potential exile to receiving community endorsement, from private understanding with Marcus to public acknowledgement of their partnership. "There's something else we should discuss." Marcus said as they neared her cabin. Practical matters resulting from today's meeting. My official position as auxiliary medical support. That and more. Word will spread about your capabilities. People from other settlements will seek your help. You'll need supplies, maybe formal training opportunities, support structures. One crisis at a time, Sarah laughed. Let's get you healed before planning my medical empire. I'm serious. Today proved your worth extends beyond this immediate community. That brings opportunities, but also responsibilities. She considered his words as they approached the familiar outline of her cabin against the night sky. The same structure where she'd once huddled alone, uncertain of survival, now represented achievement and possibility. But achievement, she was. Learning required constant protection and cultivation. You're right, she acknowledged finally. We'll need to think strategically about the future. But tonight, I just want to ensure your legs properly tended and that my chickens haven't escaped their coop again. Practical as always. Someone needs to balance your philosophical tendencies. Inside the cabin, routine medical care grounded them both after the day's emotional intensity. Sarah cleaned and redressed Marcus's wound with practiced efficiency while he detailed everything he'd observed during the meeting. Community alliances, potential challenges, opportunities for expansion of her services. You notice everything, she commented, noting how his assessment included details she'd missed while in the midst of confrontation. Watching is sometimes easier than participating, though today required both. As night settled fully around them, with Marcus resting and the evening chores complete, Sarah sat by the fire with mending. The simple domesticity felt almost surreal after the day's drama, yet this too was part of frontier life. Dramatic public moments followed by quiet private persistence. Sarah. Marcus's voice came soft from the bed. Do you ever regret answering Thomas Brennan's letters? The question deserved a thoughtful response. She set down her mending, staring into the flames. I regret being desperate enough to seek security through marriage to a stranger. I regret the circumstances that made such desperation necessary. She paused, seeking accurate expression. But I don't regret the choice that brought me here. It led to capabilities I didn't know I possessed, community I never expected to find, and love that's real rather than convenient, even if it developed through circumstances neither of us planned. His answer came after a moment's quiet. I spent 5 years believing solitude was safety. Now I realize isolation is just another kind of vulnerability. Your presence here, not just as someone to help, but as someone who chose to build something meaningful despite every obstacle. That's changed everything. Quite a speech for a man of few words. Special circumstances require expanded vocabulary. Sarah laughed softly, the sound mixing with the fire's crackling. Outside, winter wind tested the cabin's walls, but inside, warmth held. Not just physical comfort, but emotional sanctuary built from shared experience and mutual choice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Owen might attempt other strategies. To reassert traditional authority, the community's temporary unity could fracture under normal daily pressures. Sarah's expanded medical role would face practical tests requiring skills she'd yet to develop. But tonight, in this small cabin that had witnessed transformation from desperate necessity to chosen partnership, Sarah Jane Whitmore felt something she'd been afraid to acknowledge. Contentment not just with survival, but with the life she was actively creating. The mail-order bride who'd arrived to a burned cabin had become a woman who stood before her community with earned respect. The silent ranch hand who'd offered minimal assistance had revealed depths of character that made formal proposals almost secondary to the partnership already established. As she banked the fire for the night and checked once more on Marcus's comfort, Sarah recognized this moment as pivotal. Not because of love declared publicly or community battles won, but because she finally understood that her worth wasn't granted by others' approval or taken by their disapproval. It existed independently, proven through action, affirmed through a choice. "Good night, Marcus," she whispered, settling into the rocking chair she'd moved beside his bed after his injury. "Good night, Sarah, and thank you." For what? For choosing to stay. Every day, despite everything, she reached out, touching his hand briefly in the darkness. "Thank you for teaching me that staying could be a choice worth making." Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered promises of snow. But inside, two people who'd found each other through crisis rested in the hard-won peace of understanding. Tomorrow would indeed bring challenges, but they would face them as they had everything else, with practical competence, personal integrity, and the quiet strength that comes from choosing partnership over simple independence or simple dependence. Leo's burned cabin had been rebuilt, but more importantly, two lives had been reconstructed around principles of mutual respect and shared purpose. Whatever formal arrangements the future might hold, this foundation would endure. Sarah drifted towards sleep, listening to Marcus's steady breathing, the cabin's familiar sounds, and her own heartbeat, keeping time with contentment she hadn't dared imagine possible just months before. From desperate survival to chosen partnership, the transformation felt complete, yet she sensed it was really just beginning. This was her life now, not perfect, not easy, but authentically hers. And that realization, more than any public victory or private declaration, sealed her commitment to whatever came next. February arrived with a false promise of warmth, followed by a blizzard that lasted 2 weeks. During this enforced isolation, Sarah's household settled into rhythms that felt less like temporary arrangement and more like permanent partnership. Marcus's leg healed steadily, allowing him to resume limited duties. Ned continued volunteering his assistance, having definitively severed ties with Caleb Owen. The day the storm finally broke, Sarah woke to unprecedented silence. No wind rattled the windows, no snow pelted the roof. She opened the cabin door to find the world transformed, pristine white expanses glittering under brilliant sunshine. "Haven't seen it this calm in weeks," Marcus observed from the kitchen, where he was already brewing coffee. His mobility had improved dramatically, though he still favored his injured leg. "It's beautiful," Sarah breathed, stepping onto the porch, despite the cold. "Almost makes the confinement worth enduring." "Almost," he agreed, handing her a steaming cup. "Ned's probably fighting his way through drifts to check on us today." As predicted, Ned arrived mid-morning, leading 2 pack horses, loaded with supplies. But he wasn't alone. Dr. Mitchell rode behind him, bundled against the cold but alert. "Dr. Mitchell?" Sarah helped the elderly physician dismount. "Is everything all right?" "More than all right. I've come with a proposition." His eyes twinkled, despite the cold. "Let's get inside where these old bones can warm up." Once settled around the small table with hot coffee, Dr. Mitchell withdrew a thick letter from his coat. "This arrived just before the storm hit. I've been waiting for clear weather to deliver it personally." He handed Sarah the envelope. The return address read, "Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania." Sarah stared at the letter, her heartbeat accelerating. "How did they—" "I took the liberty of writing to them about your capabilities, including documentation of cases you've handled." Dr. Mitchell's expression pleased. "They're offering a correspondence course in midwifery and basic medicine, full certification, upon completion." "Formal training," Sarah whispered, breaking the seal with trembling hands. "But the cost, the time." "Costs covered by community subscription. I started the fund after our council meeting, and responses exceeded expectations." He smiled. Time can be managed. The course is designed for frontier practitioners who can't attend in person. Sarah scanned the letter's contents, barely able to process the opportunity being offered. Formal medical education, certification, recognized across territories, connection with other women in medicine. This is... She couldn't finish the sentence. Deserved, Marcus supplied firmly. Your work here has already proven you belong among trained practitioners. But the time commitment, the study requirements, which is why you'll need additional support. Dr. Mitchell leaned forward. I'm prepared to sponsor your education, provide clinical supervision, and advocate for your certification when the time comes. Ned shifted in his chair. I'd like to help too, with the cabin, animals, whatever you need. Sarah looked around her small kitchen at the faces offering support. Dr. Mitchell with his professional enthusiasm, Ned with his newfound purpose, Marcus with understanding that transcended words. The magnitude of their belief in her potential overwhelmed the protective cynicism she'd maintained. Why, she asked simply, why invest in my education? What guarantee do you have that I'll stay, that I won't take these skills elsewhere? No guarantees, Dr. Mitchell acknowledged. But in 47 years of practice, I've learned to recognize genuine calling versus temporary convenience. You have healing hands and an analytical mind. This territory needs practitioners like you. And personally, Marcus added quietly, your growth serves everyone's benefit, including mine, especially mine. The weight of his meaning settled between them. They'd reached a point where her achievements enhanced rather than threatened their developing relationship. I accept, Sarah said, the words feeling both momentous and inevitable. With gratitude I can't adequately express. Express it through excellence, Dr. Mitchell advised. That's the only gratitude skilled mentors require. The following weeks blurred with new routines. Sarah's days involved managing her increasing patient load while diving into correspondence course materials. Anatomy texts shared table space with herbal guides. Letters from Pennsylvania medical professors arrived with clinical assignments requiring detailed case studies. Marcus took over more household responsibilities as his strength returned, cooking meals while Sarah studied, handling evening chores that allowed her extended reading time. Ned's assistance expanded beyond necessity into genuine partnership, creating a household system that functioned with surprising efficiency. This feels different, Sarah observed one evening, surrounded by medical texts while Marcus prepared dinner, like we're building something sustainable rather than just surviving. Different how? He paused in chopping vegetables, interested in her assessment. There's intention behind everything now. We're making choices based on future planning instead of immediate crisis. Planning suggests permanence. Planning suggests hope, she corrected, for permanence and for achievement. Both are newer concepts for me. As March arrived with tentative warmth, Sarah's medical practice evolved. Word of her formal education spread through neighboring settlements, bringing patients from increasingly distant homesteads. She treated everything from childbirth complications to mining accidents, always under Dr. Mitchell's supervision, but with growing independence. One afternoon, while documenting a particularly complex case, Sarah realized the cabin's limitations. Her patient load required more space, better organization, dedicated treatment areas. We need to consider expansion, she told Marcus over supper. Perhaps a separate medical building, or at least room additions. Already been thinking about that, he admitted. Also thinking about combining our households more formally. Separate buildings seem unnecessary. The statement hung between them, loaded with implications they'd been dancing around since his public declaration. Marcus, Sarah set down her fork deliberately, what exactly are you proposing? Marriage? Eventually? When you're ready. His grey eyes met hers steadily. I know you value your independence, your career development. I'd never ask you to sacrifice either, but I also know what I want, and it includes building a life with you, here or wherever your medical practice takes us. And if my practice requires relocating, following further education opportunities, then we relocate. His response came without hesitation. My ranch is important, but it's not my identity. You've taught me the difference between roots and ruts. Sarah studied his face, searching for signs of noble sacrifice or unrealistic promises. Instead, she found genuine sincerity, backed by months of demonstrated support. You're serious about this flexibility? Try me. Before she could respond, a commotion outside interrupted their conversation. Rapid hoofbeats, urgent voices, a wagon, creaking under evident strain. Sarah opened the door to find a distraught woman holding a blood-soaked cloth to her husband's chest. "Please," she gasped. "I heard you might help. He's been shot." Without hesitation, Sarah directed them inside. "Marcus, bring hot water. Ned," who had arrived for evening instruction, "help get him onto the table." For the next 3 hours, Sarah worked with intense concentration, drawing on everything she'd learned from Dr. Mitchell, her correspondence studies, and practical experience. The bullet had entered the man's shoulder, missing vital organs, but causing significant tissue damage. As she cleaned, stitched, and dressed the wound, Sarah was vaguely aware of Marcus and Ned assisting with practiced efficiency. Her impromptu surgical team worked with the coordination of formal medical staff. "That should hold," she finally announced, exhausted but satisfied. The patient's color had improved. His breathing steadied. "He needs constant supervision for the next few days. Any sign of fever, infection, or unusual pain?" "We'll stay," the wife said immediately. "If you'll permit it. We've nowhere else to go, and the nearest doctor—" "Of course." Sarah was already calculating space arrangements. "We'll make accommodations." After settling the couple, Sarah found herself alone with Marcus in the kitchen. Adrenaline from the emergency was fading, leaving her emotionally raw. "That was—" she began, then stopped, overwhelmed by the evening's implications. "That was you saving a life," Marcus said simply. "In your own home, using skills you've developed and formal knowledge you're acquiring. The person who answered Thomas Brennan's letters couldn't have done what you just did." The person who answered those letters was desperate and naive. The person who answered those letters was brave enough to start over. Everything since then has just been becoming. His words settled something inside her. Sarah moved to him, taking his work-roughened hands in her smaller ones. "Marcus Cole," she said solemnly, "I would very much like to marry you. When my correspondence course is complete, when I understand my obligations as a certified medical practitioner, when we've built something here that can sustain both our dreams." His slow smile transformed his weathered features. "That sounds like a yes with conditions. That sounds like a partnership proposal from someone who finally understands her own worth. And my answer is unlimited yes, to the partnership, the practice, the life we're building." He pulled her closer, "including tolerance for medical emergencies, interrupting romantic moments." She laughed, the sound mixing relief with genuine joy. "Tolerance will be necessary. Emergencies don't respect romance or privacy," Ned added, entering the kitchen with apologetic timing. "Sorry to interrupt, but our patient is asking for more water and his wife wants to discuss aftercare." "Back to work," Sarah sighed, but without real complaint. This was her life now. Medicine and Marcus, crisis and contentment, individual achievement and shared purpose intertwining in ways she couldn't have imagined months earlier. The following weeks established their engagement as fact, even before formal announcement. Sarah wore no ring, such luxuries remained impractical, but the change in her relationship with Marcus was evident to everyone. Dr. Mitchell observed their partnership with particular interest. "You're creating something new," he told them one afternoon while reviewing Sarah's case studies. Not traditional marriage where woman sacrifices career, not modern separation where careers compete. Something integrated, adapted to circumstances, Marcus corrected, like everything else we do here. Perhaps adaptation is the future of marriage in territories like this, Dr. Mitchell mused. Partnerships built on practical necessity, evolved into emotional commitment, sustained by mutual respect and shared work. Sarah considered his words while treating a farmer's wife for recurring headaches later that day. Her patient, a woman who'd endured frontier hardships for 2 decades, offered unexpected wisdom. "Heard you're marrying Marcus Cole," she said, during the examination. "That's good. Man who supports woman's work instead of resenting it, that's rare anywhere, invaluable here." "How do you manage it?" Sarah asked. "Balancing family obligations with individual identity?" "Don't balance. Integrate." The woman smiled. "My husband tends children when I work the fields. I manage accounts when he works cattle. Marriage here isn't about traditional roles. It's about surviving and thriving together." As April painted the landscape green with new grass and early wildflowers, Sarah's medical confidence grew exponentially. Her certification studies were proceeding excellently, but more importantly, her practical experience had expanded beyond routine care into surgical assistance under Dr. Mitchell's guidance. "You're ready for independent practice," he announced. "One May morning, subject to official certification, of course, independent. Your own medical practice, certified midwifery, the authority to handle cases without my supervision." He studied her reaction carefully. "The question is location. You could establish practice anywhere in the territory." Sarah glanced toward the door where Marcus was working on cabin repairs. "I've found my location, even if better opportunities arose elsewhere." Opportunity isn't just about location, it's about community, support systems, personal connections. Those exist here. Dr. Mitchell nodded approvingly. "Wise answer, though I suspect Marcus's presence influences that wisdom." Marcus's presence represents those connections, but he's not the only reason to stay. This community has invested in my education. I owe them competent service. "And your plans with Marcus? Wedding timeline?" "September," she decided aloud, surprising herself with certainty. After summer's medical demands ease, but before winter complicates celebration. That evening she shared the decision with Marcus while they watched sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. He'd spent the day constructing additions to the cabin, a proper medical room with dedicated entrance, examination space, supply storage. "September wedding," she announced, "if you're still interested." "Only been waiting since December," he replied, then grew serious. "You're sure? This will formalize everything. No more speculation about propriety, but also no more complete independence. Independence was necessary for survival. Partnership is chosen for growth." She leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "I've learned the difference. And your medical work will continue, expanded, hopefully improved, with your support, not despite it. Always." The simple word carried the weight of promise, backed by months of demonstrated commitment. As June brought high desert summer to Wyoming territory, Sarah's life settled into patterns that once would have seemed impossible. Morning medical consultations, afternoon house calls, evenings studying or managing her expanding practice, nights shared with Marcus in companionable comfort. The formal education from Pennsylvania advanced her beyond practical experience into theoretical understanding. Chemistry, anatomy, pharmacology, subjects that once would have intimidated now provided frameworks for intuitive knowledge she'd developed. "Understanding why treatments work makes you a better practitioner," she explained to Ned, who was assisting. "More frequently, Intuition guided by education is a powerful combination. You thinking about training others, passing knowledge forward? The question caught her thoughtfully. Eventually, perhaps. Right now, I'm still learning too much to teach effectively. Maybe teaching happens through doing, not formal instruction, Marcus observed from the doorway. The way you've taught me about medicine just by working alongside you. That's different. You've learned emergency care, basic wound treatment, and the importance of observing symptoms, understanding patient comfort, maintaining sanitary conditions. He counted, more than many formally trained people know. As July's heat deepened, Sarah began receiving correspondence from other women practitioners across territories. Her name had circulated through medical networks, prompting letters seeking advice, offering collaboration, sharing experiences. "You're building professional connections," Marcus noted, watching her write responses one evening. "Building community. Within the professional community," she corrected. "Women physicians face unique challenges. Sharing knowledge helps everyone. Your horizon is expanding beyond Stormwind Creek." Yes and no. Sarah chose words carefully. Professional connections expand opportunities, but personal foundation remains here, with you, with our community, with work that has meaning. And if those connections offer opportunities we should consider, then we consider them together as partners. The conviction in her voice reflected hard-won understanding. She'd arrived in Wyoming seeking security through dependence. She'd discovered strength through independence. Now she was learning that true partnership transcended both states, creating something stronger than either alone could achieve. August brought harvest season and its attendant medical demands, agricultural injuries, exhaustion, digestive complaints from diet changes. Sarah's practice operated nearly around the clock, with Marcus and Ned managing household responsibilities to maintain functionality. "This is what marriage will look like," she warned Marcus during a rare quiet moment. "Interrupted dinners, midnight, emergencies, plans constantly adjusting to medical demands. This is what partnership looks like," he corrected. "Supporting each other through demanding work because we value the work itself and respect each other's commitment to it." The distinction mattered. As the wedding date approached, Sarah found herself not nervous about commitment, but excited about formalization. Their relationship had proven itself through crisis and routine, establishing the foundation that formal marriage would celebrate rather than create. 2 weeks, she announced one evening, reviewing final wedding preparations. "Ready for this to become official?" "Been ready since December," he repeated his familiar refrain. "Question is whether community's ready for medical practice attached. To marriage are officially blessed. Community will adapt, like everything else." She smiled, remembering her own adaptation from desperate mail-order bride to confident medical practitioner. "We'll make it work because it's what we choose, not what circumstances imposed." The simple statement encapsulated everything they'd learned together. Choice over circumstance, partnership over dependence, growth over mere survival. As September approached, bringing promises of wedding and another harsh winter, Sarah felt not anxiety, but anticipation. The woman who'd answered false letters seeking escape had become someone who created rather than fled, who chose rather than accepted, who built rather than merely endured. The silent ranch hand, who'd offered minimal assistance, had revealed depths of character that made formal vows almost anticlimactic to partnership already established. Together, they faced whatever September and the rest of their lives might bring, not with the desperation that had driven earlier choices, but with hard-earned wisdom that true strength comes not from isolation or dependence, but from consciously chosen partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. The burned cabin and false promises had led, through circuitous path, to something real and lasting. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the greatest blessings arrive disguised as disasters, teaching us to recognize true value only after we've learned to create it ourselves. September 15th, 1874. The morning dawned crisp and bright, autumn painting golden, aspen leaves against impossibly blue sky. Sarah woke in her cabin for the last time as an unmarried woman, though the thought carried no sadness. Today wasn't ending, but transforming her independence into something richer. The ceremony would take place at noon in the small church, followed by celebration at the community hall. Rosa Martinez had orchestrated details with military precision, ensuring Sarah could focus on medicine until the last possible moment, which proved fortunate. She'd been called to deliver twins at the Henderson farm at 3 that morning. Big and day for multiple celebrations, Dr. Mitchell had observed as she cleaned up after the successful births. New life and new marriage, both requiring patience, skill, and occasional prayer, Sarah had replied, exhausted but satisfied. Now, as morning light streamed through her cabin windows, she moved through familiar routines with heightened awareness. The copper wash basin where she'd scrubbed countless blood-stained hands, the small table where she'd studied by lamplight, the rocking chair where Marcus had dozed during her illness. Each object held memory, each corner contained story. Rosa arrived promptly at 9 with Sarah's wedding dress, a creation in soft blue wool with white lace collar, practical enough for frontier life but elegant enough to mark the occasion. Marcus, already at the church? Sarah asked, pinning up her hair. Gone since dawn, making sure everything's perfect. Rosa secured the last hairpin. You know, I've seen many women marry in Stormwind Creek. Most looked either desperate or resigned. You look satisfied. The observation struck Sarah as profoundly accurate. I've learned the difference between marrying for security and marrying from choice. And your medical work? After today, you'll be Mrs. Marcus Cole, certified medical practitioner. Some might see conflict in those roles. Some might, but we're creating new definitions here. Sarah examined her reflection. Partnership that enhances rather than diminishes. At 11:30, they made their way to the church. The entire community had gathered, even Oliver Harper, though he maintained careful distance. Sarah's transformation from controversial newcomer to valued community member was complete, marked by this gathering of people whose lives she'd touched through medical care. Dr. Mitchell waited inside, prepared to escort her down the aisle. Ready for this final treatment? He joked. Legally binding someone to tolerate medical emergencies indefinitely? He's had practice, Sarah replied, accepting his arm. As they entered the church, Sarah's gaze found Marcus immediately. He stood at the altar wearing his best suit, hands clasped calmly. No nervous fidgeting, no uncertainty, just steady presence that had sustained her through every challenge since their first meeting. The ceremony itself was simple, officiated by Reverend Wilson with sincerity that honored both tradition and their unique circumstances. When asked to speak their vows, they'd chosen to write personal promises rather than recite standard text. Sarah Jane Whitmore, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the small church. You arrived in Stormwind Creek seeking security. Instead, you built strength. You thought you needed someone to provide for you. Instead, you learned to provide for others. He paused, letting his words settle. I promise to support your medical work because it matters to these people, not because it connects to my needs. I promise to respect your independence, even as I offer partnership. And I promise to be honest when medical emergencies interrupt our plans, though I'll reserve the right to complain occasionally. Gentle laughter rippled through the congregation. Sarah took his hands, feeling their familiar strength. Marcus Cole, she responded, you taught me the difference between surviving and living. You showed me that true strength means accepting, help, offering support, and building something greater than individual accomplishment. She drew breath for the most important part. I promise to practice medicine wherever life leads us, knowing you support this calling. I promise to share the burdens of ranching life because partnerships require mutual contribution. And I promise to remember that love isn't just accepting circumstances together, but choosing each other every day, despite those circumstances. The exchange of rings, simple gold bands crafted by the town blacksmith, formalized what their lives had already established. When Reverend Wilson pronounced them husband and wife, Sarah felt not dramatic transformation, but gentle culmination of months spent building toward this moment. The celebration at the community hall demonstrated how thoroughly Sarah had integrated into Stormwind Creek society. Tables groaned under contributed dishes, musicians tuned instruments, and conversation flowed easily among gathered townspeople. Even former opponents like the Ladies' Aid Society members offered sincere congratulations. "You've certainly surprised us," Margaret Wilson admitted during reception. "When you first arrived, we worried about unconventional arrangements. Now we rely on your medical expertise more than propriety." "Funny how necessity shifts perspective," Sarah replied diplomatically. "More than necessity. You've proven competence beyond criticism." Mrs. Wilson paused, then smiled genuinely. "Congratulations on building something lasting from difficult beginnings." As afternoon wore on, Sarah found herself moving smoothly between social celebration and medical consultation. Wives sought quiet advice about pregnancies, men displayed injuries requiring assessment, children presented minor ailments for inspection. Marcus watched with amused understanding as their wedding party doubled as an impromptu clinic. "Sorry," she apologized during a rare moment alone with him. "I can't seem to separate celebration from practice." "Don't apologize. It's exactly what I expected." He spun her gently on the dance floor. "Besides, watching you work with such confidence, knowledge, capability, that's attractive. Even when it interrupts our wedding dance, especially then, reminds me why I fell in love with you." As evening approached, Ned presented them with an unexpected gift. A framed certificate declaring the cabin's expansion legally registered as Whitmore Cole Medical Practice. He'd secretly coordinated with county officials to formalize the arrangement. "Your own licensed practice," Dr. Mitchell explained. "Official recognition from territorial authority. You're not just auxiliary support anymore, Sarah. You're an established medical practitioner." The significance overwhelmed her. "But the correspondence course isn't complete. Practical experience counts towards certification. Your case documentation, my supervision records, patient testimonials, everything adds up." He smiled proudly. "I submitted my final application last month. Authorization arrived yesterday." Sarah stared at the certificate, processing this unexpected development. Her medical knowledge, once desperate self-education, was now officially recognized. Her practice, initially necessity-driven assistance, had become a legitimate profession. "Thank you," she whispered, then louder. "Thank you all. I came to this community seeking basic survival. You've given me life's work." As twilight painted the sky, the celebration slowly concluded. Families departed for evening chores, musicians packed instruments, and cleanup began. Sarah and Marcus finally found themselves alone on the church porch, watching stars emerge. "Tired?" he asked, noting her slight lean against his shoulder. "Exhausted, fulfilled, nervous, grateful." She catalogued her emotions. "And ready for tomorrow, next month, whatever medical emergencies arise next winter." She turned to face him. "Are you really prepared for this life, Marcus? Medical practice means irregular hours, interrupted plans, constant demands on time and attention. You've been asking variations of that question for months." His hands found hers. "Let me answer definitively. I'm not just prepared for this life. I want it because it's your life, and you're who I want to share mine with. Even when I smell like carbolic acid and my hands are stained from medicines, especially then, when you're completely absorbed in saving someone's life, when you're fighting against circumstance to preserve health, that's when I see most clearly why I love you." His honesty touched something deep. Sarah rose on tiptoes, kissing him with gentle thoroughness. "Then let's go home, to our home." The walk back to the cabin felt different, anticipation replacing anxiety, certainty supplanting doubt. Inside, they found Ned had left not only wedding gifts, but also updated patient files, reorganized medical supplies, and fresh flowers in every room. "He's been busy," Marcus observed, examining the medical notation Ned had completed during their absence. "We're blessed with unexpected friendships," Sarah agreed, reviewing her assistant's work. "His note-taking skills have improved considerably." "Sarah." Marcus pulled her attention back to him. "As much as I appreciate your dedication to practice, perhaps we could prioritize differently tonight." Heat rose in her cheeks, but she met his gaze directly. "You're right. The patients aren't emergencies, and tomorrow will come soon enough for regular practice." Exactly what I was thinking. Their wedding night unfolded with natural ease, intimacy built on months of growing emotional connection. No awkwardness shadowed. Their union, just continuation of partnership into deeper territory. Later, as they lay together in comfortable silence, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From burned cabin to licensed medical practice, from desperate survival to chosen partnership, from Thomas Brennan's false promises to Marcus's reliable presence. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked quietly. "That I never could have imagined. This outcome when I stepped off that stage in November. Disappointed? Grateful. Everything I thought I wanted, security, defined role, escape from responsibility, would have diminished me. This life demands more, but offers infinitely more. In return, and winter, your first married winter in Wyoming, Sarah considered the question seriously. Will bring medical challenges I'm better equipped to handle, domestic complications we'll navigate together, and probably moments of doubt when weather seems endless and responsibility overwhelming. Sounds about right, but we'll manage, because we have systems, support, and most importantly, understanding about why we choose this together. As autumn deepened toward winter, their marriage settled into rhythms that honored both individual purposes and shared commitment. Sarah's medical practice expanded with her certification, drawing patients from increasingly distant settlements. Marcus developed his ranch operations while fully supporting her medical demands, creating household systems that functioned whether she was home or called away for days. Their first real test came in early October when an influenza outbreak struck 3 neighboring homesteads simultaneously. Sarah spent 5 days managing the crisis, riding between settlements, coordinating care with Dr. Mitchell. Marcus maintained her practice in town, handled routine cases under her written protocols, and ensured her return each night to hot meals and updates on local situations. "Partnership," he reminded her when she apologized for the extended absence. "This is exactly what we signed up for." Most husbands would object to wives disappearing for days. Most wives don't save lives for their profession. We're not most. In couples, Sarah. By December, their household ran with efficient cooperation that impressed even practical frontier standards. Ned had formally become Sarah's medical assistant, freeing Marcus to focus on ranch expansion. Patient records filled 2 ledgers, medical supplies required a dedicated storage room, and their reputation extended territory-wide. "You're building a medical legacy," Dr. Mitchell observed during a quarterly review. "Formal practice that will continue long after we're gone. We're building life together, Sarah corrected. Medical practice is a component, not entirety. Christmas Eve found them hosting a community gathering at the expanded cabin. Patients and neighbors filled rooms where Sarah had once huddled alone, afraid to venture beyond necessity. Now conversation flowed easily, children played safely in corners designated for their entertainment, and medical consultation, naturally, interwove with social celebration. "Do you remember last Christmas?" Marcus asked as they prepared for bed after guests departed. "I remember isolation, fear, uncertainty about surviving winter." And now, Sarah surveyed their home. Medical equipment sharing space with holiday decorations, patients' gifts mingling with wedding presents, signs of professional practice and domestic life fully integrated. "Now I remember last year with gratitude for everything it taught me, about strength, community, choice, and how sometimes the wrong path leads to exactly where you need to be." Outside, Wyoming wind tested window seals, promising another harsh winter. Inside, Sarah Jane Whitmore, now Sarah Cole, prepared for night beside her husband, in a home that doubled as medical practice, in a community that had transformed from hostile uncertainty to supportive foundation. The mail-order bride, who'd answered desperate advertisement in Philadelphia, had become a pioneering medical practitioner in frontier territory. The silent ranch hand, who'd offered minimal assistance, had revealed capacity for partnership that honored rather than constrained professional ambition. Together, they faced winter 1874, not as a trial to be endured, but as a season to be navigated through combined strength, shared purpose, and love that had grown from practical foundation into something profound enough to sustain whatever challenges lay ahead. As sleep approached, Sarah felt contentment that derived not from easy comfort, but from difficult achievement. She'd built something real from devastating beginnings. She'd chosen partnership that enhanced rather than diminished her capabilities. She discovered that true security comes not from dependence or independence, but from knowing you can create meaningful life regardless of circumstances. The burned cabin, false promises, harsh rejections, all had been necessary steps toward this moment of calm certainty. Tomorrow would bring new medical challenges, winter struggles, ongoing adaptation of marriage to profession. But tonight, Sarah Cole rested in the knowledge that she had finally, truly found her place in the world, not granted by others, but created through her own choices and sustained by partnership that allowed full expression of who she was becoming. This was her life now, complex, demanding, deeply satisfying. And that realization, as much as any formal vow or medical certification, marked the true completion of her transformation from desperate bride to established practitioner, from survivor to partner, from woman defined by circumstance to person, who had consciously created her own destiny. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.